Welcome to the District of Clearwater Committee of the Whole meeting for some day in the month of the 8th of July. And I'll turn the chair over to Councillor Herring.
All right, so we'll call to order the, not the regular council meeting, the Committee of the Whole meeting for July 8th. Wow, I'm out of it, obviously. And any introduction of late items for this meeting? Seeing none, can I get someone to move the adoption of the agenda? And a seconder, seconded by Mayor Blackwell. All those in favor? Thank you. We have no declarations of conflict of interest, no delegations, no adoption of the minutes, no unfinished business, and we'll move straight to number 8, new business, a staff report on the community grant policy. Who would like to speak to that?
Good afternoon, Council, Chair and Council. Today I have a few notes on my report to Council or to Committee of the Whole. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's direction on the community grants portion or community project grant portion of the new draft policy, specifically funding the community project grant and specific criteria for the community project grant. In the report, we have 3 categories of grants. We have the community grant, the project grant, and in-kind. So this report is for the larger project grants. The recommendation in this report is to guide Council to address any changes in either the funding source for this portion of the grant or special criteria. Just a reminder to Council, total 2025 budget donations to be made on behalf of a community this year for 2025 is PTA's $120,000. Regular grants and aids, we have budgeted about $33,000. And project grants, we have budgeted $374,000 for a community of just over 2,500 people. We are donating on behalf of our citizens $527,000. To highlight some of the report items, all funding and distribution of the program must be included in the financial plan. The council would like to, if council would like to add a cap to the project or to the project grant category, I have provided an example as a percentage of the balance, including interest. The funding of the grant program is at council's discretion. Examples that council may use for funding are donations, taxation, reserves, or surplus. The criteria for the special project grants are in section 5 as a base eligibility criteria. All applicants would be following those criteria. In addition to those criteria, applicants for the project grant items are in section 7.2 for additional criteria. This grant, we are recommending that the staff is recommending that they complete the project within 12 months. However, we have provided a exception reporting if they request an extension. And payment is reimbursed upon final report and review of the final documentation. So it's more of a reimbursement rather than in some of the smaller grants we provide the payment upfront. And just a note that the District of Clearwater, when they manage their projects or programs, they are not part of this community grant program. Other policy changes to come, just so that we are aware. At the last meeting, council requested to increase the regular grants from $5,000 to $7,500. So we'll be making those changes. We've increased the limit for, just so that we can reduce administration for the small grants from $1,000 to $2,000. We've increased in-kind donations to $2,000. Staff needs to complete the narrative sections and the definitions. And in the policy statement, we would like to add an acknowledgement for donated sources as well. So that concludes my report. And we're into discussion of if council would like to make any changes to the funding of the project grants, make any changes to the criteria.
I might have missed it. On page 13 of 17 in the agenda, 7.2.8, the maximum grant available in this category is, and then it says insert amount. Which category is that referring to? That's for the second tier?
7.2 is a project grant criteria. Those are the large items. And staff has not made a recommendation. This is part of what we were talking about here in the funding portion of the conversation.
Okay. Mayor Blackwell?
Yeah, thank you. You actually, when I was taking notes before the meeting, you actually hit a bunch of the ones that I actually wanted to talk about, changing upscaling, and I wasn't at the last meeting. So increasing some of those base limits from 5,000, I thought some of those were too low, and 1,000. As far as capping the maximum on the project grants, if we were to do that and something extraordinary came along, what would be the process to exceed that cap? And, you know, I do like your idea of essentially that it would end up at almost the $250,000 mark as sort of like the base cap, that we really, you know, we'd have to do some sort of exceptional process above that. But yeah, I mean, that's
So
sort of my
staff has anticipated that to some degree, and I just need to find it. If you look at 4.10, so in 4.10, it reads, council may consider applications from nonprofit organizations that do not adhere to this policy but have significant merit in terms of community value.
So can I just repeat, because maybe there's been some changes to what was in this report. So you've changed the amounts for the in-kind amount to now 2,000, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and would there be any consideration for some verbiage that might exceed that? So I look to when we've donated ice time for provincials or something. I think that would exceed it. So would there be an exemption process that they would go through?
It's entirely up to council if the council wishes to do that.
Okay, so I share that for thought there. The second thing is that in this, it also said on those in-kind it should not be determined for year after year premise. But I did wonder about that in terms of in-kind, because often the in-kind uses community assets that have either been donated to this district or provided by taxed funds. So what would the harm be? So for example, the tents, right? So we purposely went after that so that other organizations didn't have to expend on that. Same thing, I'll go back to the ice example, or even the ball fields. Like, by not having to raise that money, they can put all their energy onto attracting people in that's got a byproduct for community economic development. So I didn't know about not being able to access it year after year after year for in-kind, but I might be missing some rationale and need to rethink that thought.
I'd just like to remind council that we are trying to focus on the project portion of this grant, but I'd be happy to answer your questions further.
And I appreciate that, but I also thought that at the end of the last meeting that because we didn't have all the voices, that there was room to also discuss it. But we can go to the project point right now too.
Yeah, I'd be happy to have that conversation. So the intent was for nonprofits to determine and to manage their own finances, not for the District of Clearwater to fund nonprofit organizations for operating costs. And that was the intent of limiting for 1 year so that the nonprofit organizations could review their financial situation and build it into their budget for next year. The purpose of rewriting the grant and aid policy is to produce a little bit more accountability in the grants that we are distributing. If council wishes to change that, it's up to council.
If you're talking specifically to in kind, which is generally us providing rental equipment,
Yes,
lend equipment, I actually do like the Councillor Sims point that, you know, if we do get people that year after year need to borrow the barbecues or the tents or certain things like that are $10,000 or $20,000 expenses, I can see the point on that. As far as doing an annual event that consistently requires staff, you know, considerable staff time, and is something that is paid for on a regular basis by the District of Clearwater for other users, then I can see where there's a problem with that. You're directing this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the items that Linda and I have been discussing a little bit as well is if there are regular in-kind donations to certain events, and if we know that event's going to happen every year, it's a bit onerous to ask those people to come and apply every year for a grant, and it's this grant and aid. So perhaps for the ones, once we get a sense that these ones are regular ongoing ones, we build them into the budget. We just have a budget line for those which says all of these items, essentially they're approved at the budget process. They don't have to do a separate grant thing. It streamlines it, but it also gives us a bit more clarity from a staff perspective of here's the things we're automatically going to support. That might be setting up barricades. It might be, free use in a certain area of what the district owns. And I think it, like I say, more with the intent of streamlining it for groups applying and just becomes part of our regular way of doing business, right?
Yeah, no, I like that. I think that's a good idea. Just take it completely off the books as part of the process. And then it's just an internal thing. Our event is this weekend. The organizing groups talks to staff, says we need the barricades, we need the tents. Can you do that for us? As long as there's no hitch to that, we do that. And yes, to Councillor Sims' point, there is economic development. I'm thinking of the car show is going to bring hundreds of people into town. Back to the project, the large project part of this. I do like what I see so far. My thinking is along the lines of, we do this and then we see how it works and then reevaluate in a year. But that's just my thought. But there's going to be things that people see in here that they want to change. So I'll just leave it at that.
Councillor Sim.
So one of the things that I think that the district had to transition from is when there was the Wellsgrade Community Forest managing funding and all large projects went to them, is it allowed some good opportunity for the district. So for example, our new heating system was a result of the partnership. So I was trying to figure out with this kind of money, which is unlikely that we'll see again, is how do we leverage that benefits the community? What are the impacts on possible taxation? Because if it's a large community project, let's take, for example, the Splash Park in its original concept. It came to council as a proposal for, I think it was $15,000 way back when. Yeah. And then it grew to 75, and then it grew to a little bit more, and now it's an ongoing part of our budget and for our taxation. How do we address that in this project criteria? Like where the district's role comes into it.
So is the project, just a question, just to clarify, is the project managed by the District of Clearwater?
I don't know because we don't have it in here. And so I'm curious if you've got anything over $250,000, the district has traditionally been a partner in it. And so what would that continue? Like, can anybody here imagine something of a large scale project that maybe was outside of the district? And in which case, if we've got large projects like that, do we have a different lens? And lastly to that is maybe we just look at, and we just consider it, given the fact that this is a committee of the whole, is what happens if we just hold those proceeds for, let's say 2 to 3 years until a larger vision comes about?
So if we're talking about grants, are we talking about grants, partnerships?
I'm talking about it all.
Okay, so let's just answer the grant question. So if it is a grant where it's managed by a third party or an outside source, we have the 4.10, which allows the District of Clearwater and the council to permit that grant if it falls outside the parameters and criteria that you have in front of you. If it is a partnership with, I think I have one more organization. I have another, right here. So 4.9 is also interesting, and council should have a read through that, and I'll read it for you. The district will not accept applications for projects that are sole responsibility of another level of government, except in cases where there is confirmed partnership. In such cases, funding from regional, provincial, or federal bodies must be demonstrated and must be equal or exceed the district's contribution. So that could be a housing complex where you have BC Housing, the district, and a nonprofit all having a partnership together, working towards a common goal. And other legal partnerships outside of the granting process is still possible.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the other kind of hint I got from Councillor Sims's question is, what about if it's a city project?
Yep.
So if it's a city project, these rules don't apply. These are grant rules for other organizations' projects. If it's a city project, the city has full discretion on how it chooses to use its reserves as long as it meets the parameters of what those reserves are for. So that's a completely different question. So in theory, if there was a project the city was wanted to see done, felt it met the criteria of even the Wells Grey Community Forest grant funding source, the city could allocate funds from that to that project without going through a grant process, because the city can't give a grant to itself. You are the decision makers on that.
So supplemental, if I may, or have you got?
Understand.
So my supplemental is, let's go back to where did part of the funding come for the initial attack? Where did it come from? Just so I'm following this.
So for the initial attack, the funding did come from the Wells Grey Community Forest Fund.
Right. So, but let's say that didn't happen and we adopt this policy. Would that project be able to be funded out of here still? Mm-hmm. And how would that work if I'm just trying to figure out how we hold the money, what we do with the money, and the fact that this is a coveted large amount of money for the District of Clearwater. And I really want to sort of protect the integrity of how we utilize it. And I'm trying to understand how that's done, because what the district does is important.
Yeah, so the intent there is that is still district funds. There would be the way I see it anyways, there would be two streams of funding coming out from that particular fund. One would be through a grant process, and then one would be projects which would be district projects where the district could say, let's take funds out of this reserve. And that's entirely falls into how we've done it in the past, where we did do that for the initial attack project that came from that at council's direction. And that still is the process moving forward. So it doesn't have to just go through this project stream if it's a district project.
Well,
So what I think you're getting at is more along, do we have a reserve policy for that reserve?
and how we utilize it. So I spoke to somebody today and they said, are those bathrooms ever going to get upgraded at Dutch Lake? Right? So we may never get a grant for that. We may never, would this be a reserve that could possibly look at it because it met the criteria of benefiting community and enhanced it in a way that we might never see? And you're right, it is, what is the policy, what are the parameters, what are the conditions of that reserve, because it is unlikely we will never receive this kind of money again, and how do we preserve it so it's just not, hacked away at?
Yeah, and fair comment on that. My understanding of what we have in front of us here is that if the District of Clearwater, as an organization, wanted to go forward with a, say, $250,000-300,000 project to revitalize, we're going to use your example, the Dutch Lake bathrooms, we would just do that as part of budget process, and it wouldn't go to a grant process. It would just go to a staff report, and then we would make that decision based on the size of it. But where does it come back to? In the spirit of is where we're going to. And I think Linda and you have questions.
Yeah, and I think for me, one thing that jumps out, like, it's a really good point, because as far as us applying for the grant funds, what is to say that we're going to use this only on these projects? What are the criteria of us accessing this? Because why not? I want to get a $5,000 grant so that we can fund council to go to UBCM, right? Because we're short on budget to send us all. Why wouldn't that be allowed under this framework, right? So to me, if I'm looking at this as a granting sum, then it shouldn't be accessible to the district as a potential grantee. That should be coming out of our own reserves, our own planning. This should be a direct to community use benefit, is how I would see this. And then I would say money that we need to take to fund our own operations shouldn't come from this grant. But that's just my take on it. What do you guys think?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I believe the purpose behind this funding, when it was given to the district, was to spend on community projects. Some of those community projects, we're the holder of that project. We're the owner of that project. For example, the beach house at Dutch Lake is a great example. We're the owners of that, but it's a community project. So I don't believe, from my understanding, and I stand to be corrected by the Director of Finance, but I don't believe there was ever rules around that this is only for external projects. So that would be a pretty massive change to the intent behind the project to say this is only for external projects.
Is not any work done by the district or the Clearwater for the benefit of the community? So could we not, under that circumstance, literally use this money for anything?
Well, theoretically, yes, but that's why you do set parameters around how you will use your reserve. This is a reserve. So you set those parameters, but in the end of the day, council does have the authority to use reserves as it sees fit. Hopefully, you don't get to a place where you get a council who decides, hey, let's use this reserve in lieu of taxation, because that's certainly not the intent of it. But council does have that authority to use it. That is part of the powers of council.
If I may. Oh, sorry.
Mayor Blackwell?
Yeah, sorry, just on that. If we were to go, and I don't want to get too much of the weeds on the existing models that of other organizations, but the other organization where this large portion of this funds came from had multiple streams as well of grant opportunities. There was a small grant program operated through the society, which mirrors in a lot of ways what we do. It was probably built off of initial Clearwater grant and aid policy, where it does allow for, those smaller things, those under 5,000, those under 10,000, sort of, event grants, people grants. The administration of educational funds, where was travel and learning was covered underneath that. Restaurants and hotels under the Trans Mountain Fund. So if we're talking about what we're talking about today, which is specific to the large project grants, that would have only been what would be seen under the commission, which was those large infrastructure, non-staff, non-event type of things. And if that's going to be the policy behind the reserve where we'd be drawing from, that's sort of how I see that moving forward. Noting Mr. Johnson's statement that the council can basically determine where funds go to, but that's not sort of our go-to anyways.
Ms. Klassen, did you still have a point?
So early in 2025, bylaw 320, council made a change to the Wellsgrey Community Forest Operating Reserve, and where we provided the purpose of this fund to provide funding or grants for projects that meet specific criteria approved by council. So it's pretty broad, but yet specific.
Councillor Sam.
And if I remember correctly, that we kept it broad at that time so we could get more granular at this time.
If council wishes to, for staff to amend the reserve bylaw, we would be happy to do that.
That is what I remember from why we did that work,
Yeah.
to go wide. So this meeting was important to get to that. So if I may, one thing in this policy, and it could just be the way that I read it, is for 7.2, it says project grant criteria. I don't know if this is helpful. To me, it sticks out a little bit more if it's large community project grant, because I got confused between the different grants and how the different policies rolled out. So I needed a larger title for it to understand that 7.2 was strictly for these larger amounts. That's just one. So the second one is, I do want to loop back to what I said earlier about the impact. So 7.2.4, do we want to have any portion that the detailed project plan would identify if there was any potential impact on district taxation? So, and it could be yes and it could be no. But I think that if we're going to have large projects of significant size, would there be a potential download to the district, and that should be acknowledged as a part of the criteria.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Agreed.
I think I wrote about that there's no free gifts. Anyways,
Yeah, but you say it in a really great way.
I think that's, yes. Yeah. And you actually alluded to it earlier, and yes, that is a fantastic idea that there needs
I
to
need
be.
a council to translate what I'm
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
say.
There needs to be, as part of that grant criteria, what are the ongoing costs of this? Because there are no free gifts. And if the project presented by somebody else, or even the District of Clearwater, requires 1, 2, 3% taxation annually to maintain and operate, then that's a burden on taxation, and it has to be part of the consideration. Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah, so for example, like highway signs or a big billboard or something, and then the society goes defunct, who then takes ownership of that large project? So there's asset reclamation in the event of, so that it's not run down. So those are all my kind of thoughts when we're dealing with this kind of money and what that means, which is why I think the criteria and some of the considerations are, because we can look at like $250,000, $100,000, but my real wish is that we hold the principle for another 2 years until we come up with some large community project that is sort of decided on. I mean, maybe that, and that's why I want to discuss it here. Maybe that's not the approach to take, but it's sort of been something that's been rumbling.
I think for me, like, a maximum grant is something I'm wrestling with, because essentially, if the best idea comes forward and it's like the whole amount, but it's going to have an equal impact to the community, then I want the ability to make that decision. Whereas, like, essentially limiting it just, it doesn't, prevent us from being able to say, actually, you've asked for too much money. We don't want to give you your full amount there based on the impact this is going to have on the community, right? So to me, like, a maximum isn't necessarily something I see as valuable here, but I don't know what others think. And then, yeah, even in terms of, wait 2 years and see what's a good idea, like, I'm not sure that, like, any amount of waiting is the right way to control whether or not something is a good idea, because circumstances change, also, to me, we should have a criteria like this one that that applies regardless of whether it's now or then. Does this benefit the community? Is this meeting this tick boxes? I think enforcing a timeline, like a 2-year wait on it, could actually kill a potential innovation.
Except my bumper stickers changes a long conversation, so I've never known 2 years to, then
You're
things
right.
that happen quickly. I'm just so sorry. I thought that was actually quite modest.
It is quick. You're right. Yeah. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I agree we need, or council needs, the freedom to look at projects that are over that maximum. I think that's useful. But it's also useful to think about what your maximum on your projects or what your annual maximum is. It does two things. A, it protects council from a flood of projects coming in, but it also forces organizations to really search hard and beat the bushes for other funding. If they think, hey, the max I can get is X amount out of the district and I need to find the rest, they're going to work harder at it. Versus an organization that thinks, I'll go to the district first and see how much they'll give me, and then maybe I'll search after that, right? So I think there's benefits on both sides. Benefits putting some limits, but then also benefit that for really extraordinary grants that have an extraordinary community benefit to them, that council then could say, hey, this one is so great, the benefits are so good that we need to consider going over. Then the other thing, what it does, if you set an annual max for the program and an annual max for the grant, then it really forces everybody to get their grants in on an expeditious basis. So for the next budget year, you don't want to get your grant in after everyone else's, if the budget's been allocated, right? So people are more expeditious putting grants in, and that allows council to really compare the value of the different projects and to come up with, hey, here's where we want to spend the funding on this, right?
So another idea, what if we were to, instead of an amount maximum, say the district will fund up to 80% of the total value of this project via this grant, to ensure that that last 20% is through a community partner, somebody else putting money on the table.
80% of their project?
Yeah, so if they're coming with a $1 million project, we don't have that much money, obviously, but they're coming with like a big project, we can fund up to 80%, and we expect 20% of the funding of that project to be obtained through a partnership or other source of donation for a grant in this category. Mayor Black?
Yeah, I mean, we have 4.10, which is sort of a get out of jail clause. I'm just going back into the actual staff report, and where that 250 number comes up is 5% of uncommitted reserve and estimated annual interest at 3%, which is nice balance at 3%. I mean, it's been higher, it's been lower, which would preserve, if we were to set sort of a guard on this for the foreseeable future. That's why I do kind of like that limit of 250, 256 is sort of what's actually put there, because it does do like a lot of other granting bodies do. CBC was this way for the longest time, where they use primarily the interest plus a small amount of the principal, and it allowed that reserve to carry on for an awful long time. But then you have 4.10, which allows you to look at those exceptional projects that are going to need a lot of explanation and a lot of planning and a lot of detail to go outside of that policy. So you're not just getting, and to Mr. Johnson's point, you're not just getting hammered with a whole bunch of $500,000, $750,000. Isn't this fantastic? And you go, yes, it is fantastic. This is great. But in the long-term planning of the community, does it serve us well? We could have spent all of this on fire trucks this year, between us and the TNRD, between fire trucks and water systems, and the dream of paving 1 kilometer or 2 of Dunn Lake Road. It could all go in one shot. So it is good to put some filters on this, And I do like the $250,000 limit and keeping it, and that, because you're doing it with a formula, it's actually, I like the formula is what I actually like, because it will float with the amount of money in the grant, or in the reserve, sorry. If we have higher interest, and that could float up. If we take a big chunk out for a big project, it could float down. But it is a good idea. I really do like that idea, because it also mirrors other granting bodies that I have seen in other granting programs.
So we had a discussion about that at the last one, so it was nice to see the numbers attached for this. I'm going to use the example of the X-ray machine. Would that be considered under this policy?
I believe the X-ray machine would have been a 4.10.
Yeah, because it was 700,000.
Yeah, so what I guess what I'm trying to get at is that there's very few organizations that will be able to access what this money is, really. And so trying to get a handle on it, so it's going to feed something. But if we had, like, you know, and I understand that there's the North Thompson Communities Foundation, but if there was like the Clearwater Community Foundations, or Lillooet has got their Lillooet Community Foundation that seems to function of their council, like if there was a different sort of body, does that complicate it? It's just, we've never seen this kind of money before, and as a small community, to your point, $527,000 has been, you know, granted to this community, a lot because of this funding. It is a way just to hold it. There may be other councils. It could be one in 18 months that comes and says, yes, we're going to use all that money and pave Dunn Lake Road. So this meeting is about providing guardrails that do protect the intent, so that we don't get into that circumstance. Because we're sort of in this circumstance because we had a conversation of intent that got us here, right? So it is really important to be clear about what's used and what's not, because there will be change in a year.
I agree. I actually do like, with the, you know, the great idea of adding the long-term costs associated with a completed project, so the operational and that sort of thing. Everything here I actually really like. I think there's a lot of, I think this is very well thought out, and it can be, it's also something that can be amended as we hit new roadblocks and go, oh, we didn't think of that, but yeah.
I'm so scared of those roadblocks.
I know, but I'm also, you know, the hardest decisions of council are things that get thrown out at us that are outside of the parameters of what we do on a normal basis. We have the decision later on today about a dog park, which is, you know, has a lot of public conversation behind it. Some of them are easy, some of them everybody's all in favor of, and some of them not. So by setting up these parameters and these limits on things, and good policy, it protects us from having to keep making decisions on big wild card things. And that's sort of where I was trying to get in my head. It saves us pain and anxiety and keeps us on track in a lot of senses by having good policy. And I so far, everything I've read here seems like good policy to me.
Okay, can I throw out one more thing for discussion, not landing or anything, just discussion. So I'm going to try two things and you guys pick it apart. So the first one, that the Committee of the Whole recommends to Council that 3%, fill in your blank, 1% of the annual interest generated from the Community Enhancement Fund be allocated to support community regular grants under the community grant policy. So I think what the 3% that was quoted in the report was like $94,000. So 1% would be $32,000, which would be approximately what we're doing now, but it would be generated through the interest.
So to generally to our grant and aid,
Well,
to something that mirrors our grant and aid, where is this going? Sorry,
this is going under this new policy. So this is the amount,
Yeah,
how
so-
we fund it.
yeah, I get
Right.
where
Yeah.
where you want to fund it out of the interest from the
Yeah.
reserve, but where is it ending up?
No, this would be to fund the small, so in-kind ones that we've been doing now.
Yeah,
So anything
yeah,
under the
Yeah,
5,000.
no, I like that.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that we're using the principal amount to do that, right? So that is the formula that,
So,
Percentage of the interest.
Yes.
To fund that.
Yes.
Yes. It helps bolster what the district can give, partners with what the district can give out of taxation allocation annually.
That's
Okay,
right.
Okay.
Okay, so the second one, and this one needs a lot of work on it, but that the principal amount of the original seed funding remain held in reserve with the intent that it be directed towards a future strategically aligned community project of long-term impact, subject to council approval and public consultation. Too much, and it may be too much, but what I think about is what I like is having community. I like having community guardrails. Again, I did like it when the original granting was from a body outside that made recommendations to council, and I thought that was helpful. Sometimes I feel that it's a lot just to have our perspectives at the council table and not to hear from the community. That's why I thought that the engagement for the dog park and the pump track were so interesting, because there was such diversity. So with a dollar amount of long-term strategic interest, does it have to be just done at this table, or can it be either a working committee or something to have influence on it? Go ahead, pick it apart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, if I could. So, couple of points, and I haven't fully unpacked what your thought was there, but with regard to saving the principal for a community project, I think that that starts with the assumption that there's one magical project out there that council wants to spend $3 million on. I don't know if that's the case. Council's certainly more aware of what's out there and what your hopes and dreams are than I am. But I would struggle with that a little bit. You know, my sense is that maybe there's good projects what are not that amount, are not anywhere near that amount, that maybe council would like to support these projects, a number of projects as opposed to one project.
And I think that's just to respond to that, and I think that that's probably true. So it can be up to, there's lots of different considerations to it, but it is looking at it. What it also does is it ties into the fact that the report said, you know, don't really do anything until after. Oh no, that was the other report. But this would allow us to get that feedback from, let's say, the OCP. So it's really just the guardrails until we've got some other visioning. Also, we haven't done the strategic, alignment yet, or update or refresh for it. So it just sort of holds it. It's just a consideration. But as I said, I wanted it to be pulled apart here.
For me, I don't like the idea of putting any sort of time limiting on it, just because I think it would be better if we can respond in the moment if something is like a great opportunity. I think the assessment of whether it's in the community's long-term interest is not necessarily a factor of time. It's a factor of the value of the project. Something that's so clearly an interest might be like, you know what, we can make the decision today. We need this, right? And like, any number of scenarios could also come forward where it's like, oh yeah, I don't know that this is how we should spend the money, but that's something we can use this criteria and apply as council and say, maybe this isn't the right use for this, maybe this is, right? We'll have some discretion there through the decision-making process.
Well, future can also be tomorrow, so there's no time limit on this, just to...
Okay, I understood you saying like years in there.
No, it was future.
Okay.
I'm practicing vague.
Anyone else? Mayor Blackwell?
Yeah, I mean, if we keep this policy, we still have 410, which basically overrides anything in the policy that has to do with timelines or amounts. So, yeah, I don't really. I urge caution with spending large amounts of money like this on anything, whether it be a large project. Things seem like the best idea at the time. One thing that has come up, in recent conversations is permissive tax exemptions or tax exemptions and long-term fee exemptions on projects, which are of great relief to those projects in the moment that we are dealing with them on the table, but basically in a way leave a legacy of debt through lack of taxation for next couple generations of tax, or next couple terms of taxpayers. Generations is the wrong word. And I would like to get away from doing that. I would like to find a way, if another large, great project that is not a project of the District of Clearwater comes forward, that we not do that is in the way that we've done it in the past. Either lower the amount of time till that wears off, or find a different way to use funds or land or whatever the district is contributing to this, to not end up in situations where we have multiple, and especially comes with housing and public facilities that are not under the control of the District of Clearwater, that we're not giving 5, 10, 15-year tax breaks on these, because we're setting ourselves up for a precedent of a whole bunch of those happening, and it's not fair to developers of projects that are not nonprofit and things like that, because they're not given the same advantage. So that is one thing that I'm thinking about this policy and how this money is used, is something when we do issue those non-district outside grants, which is what the policy is for, that we take that into consideration as to, we're funding this in much the same way as Councillor Sim mentioned to the long-term operating costs. It's a cost to the taxpayers of the District of Clearwater, is a cost that the future councillors have to deal with, and a loss of taxation revenue, so it has to be considered as well. And I'm going to stop talking because I've lost my train of thought.
Well, no, I think you've just reiterated the fact that what we want to do is we want any large projects to ask about what the impact is to to the community and taxation. And then that is where it's factored in, so that if it's, that the taxes will be waived, let's say for 3 years, that's the commitment, like that's the ask. So it's got a time, it's gated, and it's not always sort of revisited. So there are a couple of projects, and I think that that's a really important thing about how we transfer debt to what you said is future cycles, but it's also future generations and taxpayers themselves. And what we agreed to is that still the time, right? And how we're doing it. But back to this one, I just struggle. What I want to know is what the district would have access to and what we would make available for these large project grants.
Ms. Klassen, did you want to speak to that?
I'm not quite sure could you repeat the question again?
So my personal stand is I just want to hold this money, keep the interest, and I want to see what bubbles up through the OCP or whatever. But I'm hearing, what's being said around the table is there could be something really great that comes up. But what I do want to know is how do we have some definition so that a council comes in and says, yeah, we're just going to take it and we're going to pave it, right? And so it's just a one and done, and it didn't adhere to some thoughtful contemplation about the long-term benefit to the community in the spirit of which the funds were given. The second thing is that what funds are good for the projects for the community. So there's two. How is the community going to use it, and how are we going to get that criteria a little more specific? And how is the district going to be able to access it to have those guardrails? That's what I'm asking for in this. And you can say, well, Shelley, that's not this policy.
I think it is in the policy. And the reason I say that is because it should align with the council strategic plan. If it does not align with the council strategic plan at the time, whichever council that is, it probably would not be part of this policy unless council decides at the time to use it for 4.10. We could put some more words around 4.10. It has a policy that has significant merit in terms of community value. I'm not saying that paving doesn't have community value, but I'm guessing that the council at the time might.
It sure does.
Yeah.
But it also does come down to, road, sewer, water are key things of ours. That's key taxpayer funded things that we're supposed to do through taxation, not through grants. Exceptional opportunity should not go outside of that. Or lack of planning should go outside of that. Exceptional opportunity so we could use those reserves as the ability to pay for something and perhaps return money through taxation to those reserves to a reserve in the future. If I'm going to take the example of paving, because now I'm going to be in the weeds. Anyways, if we had $300,000 paving project here, the opportunity to get a hell of a deal and do 2/3 as much for 600, or 3 times as much for $600,000. We didn't have that money available through reserves. Could we borrow it from this and pay it back, or use it from this? I don't know what the answer is to that. But those are the kind of opportunities that I think realistically come up, and whether or not we, now I'm completely lost. I'm gonna stop talking now, but I think you get the gist of what I'm talking about.
On that, borrowing from that, would you not just borrow from wherever we could borrow money, municipal, government, whatever? I mean,
Take all that back. Yeah, that's right. There's a different way of doing that. I don't think I should muddy the waters with this, even with that thought.
okay.
If I may,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I strongly agree with the mayor's statement that this grant, the purpose behind it is not to fund things that are the normal purview of council, right? Our purview is water, sewer, fire trucks.
Oh,
That's our normal purview of council. That's where they are supposed to be funded from. Now, the question, maybe a little thought bubble is, well, how about the initial attack crew? That was outside of the normal purview of government. It's a new thing that most municipalities, or very few municipalities, have funded that and gone down there. And for the reasons we all are well aware of, we decided to do that. As council will be aware, is totally aware, we did have a request for funding of a fire truck in another jurisdiction. That was within the purview of that local government to fund that. So it bears thinking about what is our normal purview, what do we expect the taxpayers to fund, because that's their responsibility to fund that. We're providing those services to those taxpayers.
Could we add a caveat, like one of the, whatever, 4.12 or 4.13, and just say exactly that this grant should not be intended to be used for the normal functions of the District of Clearwater?
well, it does say that.
Where
It
is
could
that?
be a little more specific.
Yeah.
Hang on, it does say it. It's, but I think what you're talking about is if we have the two different streams, like we can't grant to ourselves, is what I heard originally.
Correct. We
Correct?
don't grant to
But the
ourselves.
reserve would still allow us
Yes.
to access that funding. And that's where I think you're looking for the reserve policy.
Yeah, so
Is
that's-
that we define it in there. So it cannot be, this reserve cannot be used to fund projects under normal function of government with the specifics.
We can add into 4.10 and put a little bit, a few more parameters around that. Perhaps infrastructure or maintaining infrastructure, something like that. We'll work on it with the CAO. And then we could update the bylaw, and a bylaw always usually supersedes the policy anyways, and we can put not for normal maintenance and infrastructure upgrades or something to that, if council wishes.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Councillor Sim?
I do want to go back to should align with the council's strategic vision. And I do struggle a little bit with it because my experience has been that sometimes strategic planning is not always on the forefront of council's mind. And sometimes it hasn't had the vigor of attention that it requires, especially when we look at granting long-term projects. And that's why I do want to have the conversation is at any point in time for large grants, let's say, $250,000 or whatever's chosen, do we have a working committee that also is the checks and balance?
You would have a grant evaluation.
Council-
Yeah.
Council is the grant evaluation committee.
But also would be fact-checked by staff prior to it coming as a staff report. Yeah, go ahead.
And the intent as well would be that if there are grants, what clearly are outside of the criteria, when we won't even bring those forward to council. We'll be able to say, no, this grant does not meet the criteria of this program. And we'll send them a copy of the policy so that they understand what that criteria is. But the goal is to do the diligence on the grants up front before they come to council. If there's ones where, oh, this is a gray area, or if it's especially if it's a project grant that, perhaps there's some strategic importance to it that council should consider, then we may bring those, but say they don't really meet the criteria, that would be a 4.10 in order to do it. It's not that we're trying to act as the gatekeepers, but quite frankly, there's some grants what do come forward that you see from time to time that they don't meet the criteria. They should really, in some ways, never come to this table, right?
And if I may, I see this mirrored in another large granting body that I deal with, to the point where in some ways staff will work with grant applications that they feel have merit, and help people color in all those fill in all those boxes, so that and even grant applications that may not score high in the end, so that people, those applying bodies, have had the opportunity to fully understand what they're applying for and fully fill in the grant application, so that it's not a technicality that knocks them out. It's the merit of the application that determines whether or not it comes to council.
Councillor Frizzle?
So on that, with the having to be aligned with council's strategic priorities, is that included in the application, the council's?
7.2.4.
Yes.
But it,
We
no,
don't-
but is it in the, I'm looking at that, if it's in the application itself, council's strategic plan, so that they can look at it and say, okay, I'm going to follow this.
Yes. So we're just developing the application based on the policy. So once council is mostly okay with the policy, then we will complete the application. You'll see that next time I bring it. I'll bring the applications as well.
Okay.
And on that topic as well, the strategic fit may be an area when staff does the review of the grants before they come to council, they may comment on specific projects of how that project fits within the strategic plan, because sometimes a member of the public may have a copy of the strategic plan and think, hey, this fits this category or this category, but may not be thinking about it in the same way that council would think about it. So staff would want to have some input into that as well before it comes to council. So I think the right intent is to get the best applications in front of council, make sure they're complete, make sure that council does get to consider all aspects, including strategic components, even if the applicant hasn't considered all those strategic components because they don't think about it, right? So
That's, yeah.
I'd, for section 8.1 and under evaluations, I'm wondering if we could add partnerships as one of the percentages, right? So perhaps, my original idea of like 80% being funded, if instead we could have it that, at least 10% or 5% of the evaluation is based on, do you have a community partner who is co-funding this initiative? I think that would even help as far as the district granting, if we are, taking from our reserve fund. Who are we working with? Exactly, yeah.
So would you suggest taking like financial management, bringing that down to 5%, and then partnership as a 10%? I think we let staff. Okay, that's a start.
Yeah,
All right.
even if we take like 1% from each category or whatever, but just add some sort of, sort of qualifier that, hey, you've talked to other people and there's more than one group interested in participating in this project.
And we're talking of this in sense of this only applies to the large
Large,
grants.
yes.
Large grants.
We're not going to make people do this work on
No.
$5,000 grant or $7,500
sure.
grant. Yeah, that's fair.
So I have
Councillor Sim?
two last ones is, one is I do go back because I do go back to the strategic plan and making sure that, whatever council sits at the table really does have the feel of the community, and it is very open and reflective. I noticed in the 2024 annual report that there was reference to that there would be another community survey done in 2025. So whether that's tied into the financial part of it or whether it's a repeat of what we did in 2021, but somehow using a survey is a check and balance to make sure that council is still accountable to their community. And it may not always be in the strategic plan because things change. Like our strategic plan has been fairly static for the last couple of years. We haven't really attended to it, but there's a new energy that's coming in. So how are we always we're just checking in with the community that we serve. How do we do that under this? And I'm not always convinced that it's just the strategic plan with sometimes how life rolls out.
I'm struggling to understand. We're talking about a new topic here now.
No, we're talking about the fact that the criteria is aligned to the strategic plan. And I'm saying if council's got a weak strategic plan, where do we keep the checks and balances where the public says, I've never liked that council strategic plan. It doesn't speak to the vast majority of us. Where are the checks and balances if it's not a good strategic plan?
To me, that's like a completely topic related to the strategic plan, and does council have a desire to do regular public surveys?
I'm just
I
saying
don't-
it's in here and it's part of the grant, and I just raise it, and it's no
Yeah.
surprise because,
Yeah,
and you can say,
Yeah, yeah.
thanks for sharing, and I'm good with that.
no, I mean, I think it's a discussion that needs to be had about, how we're checking in with the public, because there's a lot of communities that do regular, have opportunities, regular online surveys and other ways of communicating to council whether or not we're meeting priorities. I just see that as a feeder that's used as an evaluation for this policy, not part of this policy. If I think that's where I'm going.
So I wanted to confirm for this section of the discussion, what we need to recommend to council is any changes. We've got a list of them. Did we come up with a number that we wanted to use? Was it the 256,000, the 3% plus?
There's a formula in the staff report.
Yeah.
I like that formula. It's 5% plus 3% interest.
Or the
Ish.
annual issue, yeah,
The annual interest, whether
from
it
the
be
prior
3
year.
Yeah, from the prior year. So 5% of principal plus the interest is available. Doesn't have to be used, is available. So
So that is the dollar value that, in theory, we would put in the budget, even though you didn't
Yeah.
make the final decision yet.
Councillor Sam?
Program, for the
If there
program.
if there were no projects that came forward that met the criteria, and that year's balance, would it just be rolled back into the fund, stay in the fund? Like does it need to be said that if
Yeah.
nothing is valued, that it's gonna go back?
Just
So
continues
does
to
it need to be said in this policy or no?
that it
I
has to
don't
be.
think so.
No, because it doesn't actually ever come out
Yeah,
other
the-
than in budget.
Just to make sure, but if we put it into budget and then it's not used, does it go then into and does it go into surplus, or would it just stay?
No.
Right? So that's just a question.
I believe the reserve says it would go back into the reserve, the way.
Okay, as long as that's in there, I think that, again, it's just future proofing.
Because we did state that we won't pay out the grants until the project is done. So if the project is never done, the grant will get paid out. So the funds will stay in that reserve. It should be noted as well that under 7.2.8, talking about the maximum, that is the program maximum. So if there's 3 applicants on it, that's not that each applicant, well, they can all apply for up to the program maximum, but odds are they won't be getting it.
And once again, this absolutely mirrors another granting organization that I deal with. And to both of the Director of Finance and the CAO's points, quite often complete funds are not paid out by that granting organization. They take those funds, if they're available to be redispersed once those grants are completed in that calendar year, quite often they will add it to the next intake of grants and boost that up, and it just helps those funds continue to be effective. So we haven't set that as a policy, but it's something to consider in the future. Is if they're we set it at, we're going to use the nice easy number of 250,000. If it's set at 250,000, but only $150,000 actually gets put out in bills, is the next granting cycle worth $350,000? So that makes things messy, but it is done elsewhere.
Okay, anyone else comments? So we have a recommendation.
Recommendation.
What recommendation? So we need to fill in the
But you
details.
said we had one.
Yeah, we have a recommendation framework. What we need to
Okay.
to discuss is what are the criteria for the community project grant component that we've agreed to include.
Okay. I just wanted to move a recommendation because I really get to do them.
It's exciting, fair. So, the formula we've agreed upon is the 256, correct? Based on that's the rough estimate, but it's the 3% plus the 5% of the annual. 3% interest.
Could we
and
just get
5%?
confirmation of those numbers? Because I think we've changed
So-
something a little bit on that.
Yeah, so the second recommendations, it talks about the funding formula. So it talks about the 5% plus the previous annual interest.
Okay.
So what I'm wondering is, could we look at 5% and then 1% to fund the smaller community grants? Does that tie into what you're thinking or no?
If council wishes, they could do that. Then we would not have taxation for the small community grants. Is that correct?
That's what I'm thinking.
For
but-
2026?
Because then that's essentially saving 1% of taxation.
Correct?
And it's done on the interest of something, so it's a it's a reinvestment into community.
If council wishes to do that,
Okay.
we could do that.
What are the thoughts around the table? I think that's a great idea.
Should go with that. I like
Okay.
that.
I like that idea. No, never mind.
So for clarity then, if we did that 1%, the first percent to the smaller grants, that reduces the overall total available for the project grants, the program total then, because then instead of 3%, it's 2%.
That's, yes,
Okay.
that's what I'm asking for the financial adjustment.
Yeah.
If that idea is if supported. So,
Solid idea.
whoa.
Okay, so we have that. The criteria, we wanted to add the partnership criteria and the evaluations. Was there any other criteria that we wanted to,
I believe we wanted to add the impact on, the
Future.
long-term operating cost impact on the District
yeah.
of Clearwater for taxation.
okay?
Yes.
So this will come back to the September meeting?
August meeting?
Oh, August, yeah.
Hopefully August.
August is our next meeting, so, yeah.
And I just think that's good because I think we've had quite a meaty discussion and there was
Good,
some
yeah.
ideas and there is some input there, so that's great.
Okay, so I think that looks like a recommendation. Do we want to move that recommendation from the committee of the whole?
Why don't we hear it in full, see what we've come up with?
All right.
Would, I can
Okay.
give it a try.
I-
The first one, I believe, that the Committee of the Whole recommends to Council to add or amend the following criteria for the community project grant component. And I believe the only thing we have to do is impact of district taxation and include partnership evaluation into the policy. So that would be that first one. Then the second one would be for funding by using the following formula: 5% of the balance plus prior year interest. And then as a second bullet, we would say we would fund the regular community grants and the in-kind grants from 1% of that amount, principal amount. So those are the two resolutions. And over and above that, I feel council would like for us staff to add the strat plan in the application. Add a small portion of the fund, the budget for regular small in-kind. It's like setting up tents and things like that for staff to make that decision, so that we continue to do that. a reserve update, so a bylaw update for the reserve for the Wells Gray Community Forest to put a few more parameters around that so that we do not use it for regular operating types or regular capital infrastructure capital.
Yeah, I do just want to add about the in-kind portion, because where I think we might sort of get into that excess is the facility waiving of the fees. So that's ball and hockey, for example. And they're important economic drivers, so how we acknowledge that exception. And I don't know what it's been, but if I'm looking at average ice time is, what is it, 120 an hour or something? And so if you've got a 5-day provincial time period, we're going to exceed that, and yet the value is really important, but we're asking it under the in-kind. So is there a special exemption for potential economic value to the community?
It's still part of the application, but there's nothing special. We have, in my few years, I haven't been here that long, I haven't seen an exemption for the hockey recently. But the ball team continuously comes to us.
That's yearly.
Well, I think what's happened with the last minute was the certainly for the provincials for U18 2 years ago, where they held it, and they did come to us with the ice time. So that was a last minute, and it and I think we could probably go back into the financials. It was really important. It was great. The team won. But it was huge economics, as they are. Same thing with some of those different ways. Anyway, those are just the areas that I'm concerned about that we don't want to lose, and we want to.
Mr. Johnson.
Okay, so
If
with
I
that,
could,
as
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Johnson?
So with regards to the waiving fees for tournaments, ball tournaments or hockey tournaments, or theoretically, I guess, figure skating tournaments, any of the large tournaments, that becomes a bit problematic given the sense that we have tournaments every single weekend at the NTSP. Every weekend in the winter, there's a tournament going on. So if you start waiving fees, that starts to take a pretty big chunk out of revenues, right?
Except for the fact that provincials don't happen all the time. The difference is that those tournaments that happen every weekend, the teams are paying to come, whereas provincials, which are extraordinary, and the home community sees the value in hosting this, and the other teams don't pay. So that's the difference of that revenue one. And what I'm wondering is maybe those are just applications that are done outside of this policy, because this one is done for
Yes,
December
please.
1st. So it's just dealt with,
Yeah,
and let's just
yeah.
let the community speak for itself and move on.
Yeah, no, I think I was going to suggest to stake it outside of this. At some point, I would like to see once we get past OCP and the other 5 things that we have to deal with, I would like to see in detailed report on how the Sportsplex operates as far as funding financial fees, things like that. We need to set a baseline on it, because I don't think council understands how it works. I can see heads shaking over there in agreement. So, yes, we need to set some baseline on that.
Okay, so
It's emerging.
with that recommendation in mind, do we have a mover for that recommendation?
I have one question before I would move it. Is this coming back to our meeting at 2:00 to be? Thank you, because then I will move it, because I would like to see it cleaned up for the
I'll
August
second it.
meeting. Thank you.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. Any further discussion? All those in favor? And that is passed. All right, and that brings us to our adjournment. Can I get a mover for the adjournment?
Yeah, just before we do adjourn, so just confirming that policy for the reserves that you would refer to in your summary, will that come back in August, or you think that as well? Okay, thank you.
All right, and do we need a seconder for adjournment?
Second.
Councillor McKenzie. All right, thank you.
I call to order this District of Clearwater regular council meeting for Tuesday, July 8th, 2025 at 2 o'clock. I would like to begin by acknowledging we are gathering together today on the unceded territory of the Simp people who have been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. There is one late item under delegations, item 7.1, and that will be a presentation from the RCMP, and you have an on-table report as well. Can I get a motion to adopt any other late items?
So moved.
Move to adopt by Councilor McKenzie. That's his late item. Can I get a seconder on that? Seconded by Councilor Frizzle. All those in favor? And the agenda is passed. Are there any declarations of a known conflict of interest or pecuniary interest? I'm not seeing the TNRD director here, though he did text me a few moments ago, but not on an issue on the agenda. So we move to item 7.1. Come on up, Grant, and give us your report.
Figured I'd be coming up a little bit later, but
Oh, we throw you right into the fire. That's what we do
sooner
in
the
Clearwater.
better. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this report to Mayor and Council. The data in this report will cover a period from January 1st to June 30th of 2025. So basically, we're combining the fourth quarter with the first quarter. We're currently operating at 83% strength as we continue to train our new member, Constable Carl Maybauer, who arrived from Depot to begin his field training on April 11th. Constable Maybauer hails from Chilliwack, BC, where he worked several different jobs, from security to corrections. He's 34-year-old male, married with a 1.5-year-old boy. We'll soon be losing Corporal McGeorge to Summerland and are working to have We also still depend on our volunteers, which include victim services as well as a interagency case assessment team. We continue to maintain our partnerships, obviously, with our frontline emergency service providers, such as our local fire departments, BC Ambulance, Search and Rescue, and our still relatively new conservation officer. So, calls for service. Total calls for service in the Clearwater Detachment jurisdiction during the first half of the 2025 year is 685. During this same time frame in 2024, we were at 830, a reduction of about 145 calls for service. In 2023, that total was 1024. In 2022, it was 1032. So it's been a noticeable decline in calls for service over the past 4 years. Ooh, Allison, nice work. That looks great. Calls for service by area, so that'd be the next. Nice. In electoral area A, Clearwater, we had 311 calls for service, which approximates to about 48% of our total call volume for the fourth quarter. Birch Island had 41 calls for service, 6%. Blackpool, 80 calls for service, which was about 12% of the total call volume. Vavenby, 46 calls for service, 7%. Avola had 27 calls for service, 4% of the total call volume for this half of the year. Blue River had 78 calls for service, 7%. And the remaining outlying unnamed areas, we had about 102 calls for service, which amounts to about 16% of our total call volume. Call types, which would be the next slide. Most of our requests for service are centered around traffic or driving complaints, collisions, suspicious vehicles, or impaired investigations. This traffic work accounted for 55% of our call volume these past 6 months of the year. A notable decrease over last year's time frame. 9% of our calls were related to persons offenses, an increase over this last time frame of about 1%. These calls include assaults, all types of uttering threats, sex crimes, and harassment. Provincial statute investigations such as bylaw or liquor complaints amounted to 11% of our files, which is up ever so slightly. Property offenses were up slightly from 10% to 18%. Property offenses include arsons, break-and-enters, thefts, frauds, mischief, those types of calls. 0% of our investigations were drug-related. We had only one complaint over the past 6 months. This is down from last year. Other criminal code investigations accounted for about 7% of our calls during the first half of the year, an increase over last year of about 1%. Other criminal code files would include breach of conditions, cause disturbances, weapons offenses, and similar files. On to our detachment priorities. Well, you're way ahead of me, Alison. Because we've been operating only slightly understaffed and our file load is down, we've been able to sustain a fairly equitably distributed workload. As a result, we've been able to put forth fairly consistent effort into working on our detachment's priorities. Number one, we have enhanced road safety. That'd be the next slide there. Enhanced road safety includes speeding, impaired and distracted driving. Clearwater members conducted about 71 documented officer violator contacts in the first half of this year. This is a slight decrease in contacts compared to last year's first half, which can be attributed to the loss of our BCHP section. The detachment is experiencing an increase in the number of visitors to the area, which is reflected in the number of calls for service. It's that time of year. Despite this increase in the number of calls for service, members remain committed to enhancing road safety and are conducting traffic stops as time permits to further this initiative. Number two is to prevent and reduce incidents of crimes involving youth. During this first half of the year, the members were either called to the various schools or provided support to various school activities. For example, members have been participating in the VITRA assessments, investigated various mischief matters, assisted school counselors in working out the reporting lines when a criminal matter is mentioned to them, and conducted bike roadies at both elementary schools. Whenever the members are at the schools to investigate a matter, they will take the time to interact with the youth present. At one of our parks where some nefarious activity was taking place, proactive park visits and community activity have shown an increase of awareness in the youth that most of their matters can be settled without having police intervene. Members in the community have also volunteered their time coaching or mentoring youth. Number three, reduce crimes against persons, reduce domestic violence. A review of our files indicates that of 35 crimes against persons investigations reported during the first half of the year, only 3 of them involved intimate partner violence. This puts us at the midpoint of our target reduction from 8 to 6, which could mean that we may be under that goal by the end of the year. Clearwater's ICAT remains very proactive with monthly meetings, and we are currently monitoring only 1 file. Ongoing cooperation between police, medical, child, and family services and mental health professionals is beneficial in the prevention and development of a more effective safety planning. Number 4, crime reduction, prolific offenders, and curfew checks. We've had excellent results with this initiative, having helped to incarcerate 2 of our recent targets for a significant period of time. Both have recently been released. However, in working diligently to oppose their proposal to community corrections to be granted permission to return to the area, we've had a measure of success. One has decided to live in the Salmon Arm area, while the other has decided on Kamloops. Clearwater Detachment has identified 3 prolific offenders at this time. 2 are drug traffickers involved in property crimes. The third is believed a freeman of the land with an extensive criminal record. Those that are on conditions are managed with regular curfew checks and frequent traffic stops. And those that are not, well, it's only a matter of time before they will be. Number 5, police and community relations, police visibility. During this first half of the year, our members attended schools for various calls and general patrols until school was done for the summer. Whenever the members are at the schools, they invest time into interacting with the youth and the kids in their classrooms. In the beginning of June, we held 2 very successful bike rodeos at both elementary schools. We also participated in this year's career fair as we did last year. We have a number of young adults in the community and youth that have expressed interest in joining the RCMP, and as a result, we've encouraged them to participate in our Police Observer program, where they ride along with one of us, shadowing them throughout our shift to give them first-hand experience into what it would be like to become an RCMP officer. And that's about it for our 6 months.
Thank you. Excellent report. Any questions from council on this report? Go ahead, Councillor Sim.
Just the gratitude for so much, in particular the engagement with the youth, and the ride along program was so successful. And during the CSS week with Careers Week and having that ride along, and now that particular youth is able to successfully pursue a pathway to the RCMP. It is because you and your team just believe passionately in the youth, and it's really nice to see those interactions and the engagement and the sense of trust and belief. And it really means a lot.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other council questions? I got 3. 3, yeah. What is a VTRA assessment?
It's a violence that we're, like when a student gets into any kind of trouble that involves violence, the schools involve us, and it's a threat. I forget what the acronym is. It's VITRA, and then they abbreviate it to
Risk
VTRA.
assessment or something. Yeah.
Violent threat risk assessment, I think it is what it stands for, yeah.
Okay, so that I get the gist of that, so that's good. We had a couple of high-profile break and enters on and sort of outside property crimes here, Sportsplex,
Yeah,
double business. My understanding is that the suspects in those are out of town.
they're from Alberta,
Okay.
male and a female.
Okay.
And they were apprehended after a bit of a pursuit and some intervention options. They were, yeah,
Okay. Yeah, just to let people know, because it.
yeah, they were
Looking at the rest of your report, it looks like a lot of good work here. Just this seemed like an anomaly
we
to
missed
what
some
we
of that stuff for
we,
sure.
we normally see. And the third one is Constable Maybauer. Is he bald? Because that seems to be.
He was,
He was.
he was, and his explanation for that was that he wanted to fit in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and he no longer is. He's working on hair again, or.
It's coming back, but
Yeah, yeah.
of course the rest of us are trying to convince him, shave your head, man. It's so
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
That way, when you're fighting with somebody, they don't have anything to grab onto.
Okay, I'm sure his wife probably has a different opinion on that, but it's all good.
Yeah.
Thank you for your report.
Yeah.
One more, sorry, Councillor Sam.
Just one more is: have you noticed an increase in unhoused members out and about?
Just recently, one has returned to town.
But no
Yeah.
increase, just
Not that I would consider an increase. Like
Okay.
we have we always have our two that are kind of in between the woods and campgrounds, and then our one. She spends a lot of time in Kamloops, but for the summer she usually comes back and tries to hang out so that she can see her children.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Anything else? No?
No, that's it. You're free to go.
Thanks,
I get
guys.
to say that to you. That's cool. Thank you. Moving on to item 8.1, minutes of the regular council meeting held January 17th. Any errors or omissions? If not, mover and a seconder on receiving those.
Move it.
Moved by Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. All those in favor? And that passes. Moving on to all the way down to 13. Not going to do a mayor's report this time. I was away on holidays. The only thing I will mention is came in the news today that Yellowhead project by Taseko is now entered the environmental assessment process, which is the official starting line of that project. More to come probably in the news over the next few weeks and years. Going on, Councillor Bratton is away. She really did want to see Sergeant Simpson's presentation, but I'll encourage her to go visit. Councillor Frizzle, you are up next.
Thank you. I attended the TNRD meetings in Kamloops from January 25th to 27th as the mayor was on holidays. I learned an awful lot there, but I also spoke to the library representative for here in Clearwater, because we discussed them moving into the seniors room here in the building and discussed the actual time frame because they had delays on their getting their shelving. And apparently now the shelving is going to be arriving in the next few weeks, so the library should be back up and running by September for sure, so that's good news. I also attended the Taseko Open House, and I was really impressed with the people that came and attended and talked to all the staff there and asked lots of good questions, and I think we're impressed with the answers that they got. I also attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the new apartment building that YCS is putting up, and I also was at the barbecue on July 1st and had lots of fun. That's my report. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Councillor Herring.
Yeah, it was great to see the community out at Canada Day on July 1st there. Just wanted to flag that I've been using the River Road quite a bit for dog walks and all that stuff and seeing tons of people out there, which is great. For any of the members of the community listening, or if you want to talk to people who you know, if anyone is interested in expanding use of that road or the restricted access that BC Parks has put on it, please reach out to me. I want to chat with you. We are hoping to do some advocacy with BC Parks, so I'd love to hear from you if you've got ideas, concerns, comments. And that's it for me.
It's quickly spark a comment thought with Councillor Frizzle. There's something she was supposed to bring up.
Yes, and that's about to do with the library, is that they're doing a bees, butterflies, and botany workshop. A talk by Madam Bee speaker. So here at the Clearwater Library, well, not really in the library, in the multi-purpose room here in the district office, on July 12th at 11 a.m. And apparently she will be talking about studying the flowers that bees visit for food and nesting, so we can get the bees coming here more and keeping them alive and well for our future health. So if you can attend, I think this will be very interesting and very informative and very important for our environment. Thank you.
Thank you for going. Oh, I missed that. Anything further, Councillor Herring? Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Blackwell. Pretty quiet couple of weeks for me, but I did attend the Canada Day barbecue. It's always a day I look forward to every year, getting to do that one. It's always well attended, and more often than not, Mother Nature, she works in our favor. It's also the one day a year I get to work with you guys as a team outside council business, and that one day is well worth it. I enjoy that. I always look forward to it. I just want to thank Ms. Culp and her team for all the hard work putting together another successful Canada Day barbecue. It was great. Neil Broswick dialing up the beach, not just Canada Day, but every day. He puts his heart and soul into that, and you can tell it looks really great down there. Bilo Foods, their generous donations and continuous support with this event. It doesn't go unnoticed. We didn't see them there this year, but they did bring down some donations for us. Miss Hurst for her expertise in the production line there and keeping the Marinine line well behind the grills. Some good laughs back there. Mr. Dave Cole, On-Call Service Center, for delivering porta potties at the drop of a hat. That came through at crunch time when things happened we weren't expecting. And that resorts to our public works coming down to shut down the water after that water leak. I appreciate it all, everyone that came in, and yeah, especially just the citizens that came down to enjoy that day. It was a full house, weather was great, and yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you for catching all those thank yous. It's important to do those, so thank you for that. Councillor Matheson is away. Councillor Sim, you're up next.
Thanks so much. I just want to acknowledge the Wellsbury Outdoors Club and their great work, especially launching summer with their summer solstice ride up at Candle Creek Trails, and really cultivating just an excellent outdoor community of all ages and abilities. Also, June 21st was the inaugural Clear Wiesen at the Clearwater Ski Hill, which was a super fun event, and it's hard to believe that people paid to go up and around, not once, but several times. And even speaking to the people that are doing our OCP, they had looked at the photos and they said, oh my gosh, that place is really incredible. So to do sort of a slow launch, to have 30 people out there, it was just a really great community thing. So my thanks to the organizers of that. Canada Day certainly been acknowledged. I think a strong shout out again to Leanne for all of her organization, but also to Mr. Prime, who quickly jumped into action, was able to coordinate a lot of SOS calls. So thank you for your work there. And I just do think a special thanks to Mayor Blackwell and also Councillor McKenzie. That grill was hot, and you guys just kept working it diligently, and it was really great watching you guys. So thank you very much. I also want to just do a shout out for the new ultrasound that was purchased, which was another big contribution to our community, thanks to wonderful, hardworking volunteers who just show that every small amount actually can add up and have impact. And speaking of impact, I do want to acknowledge the passing of Karen Simpson. And Karen Simpson really embodies this community and the fact that you can be one person who makes so many ripples and touches so many people's lives. And her absence will certainly be felt. And she was, in her own way, just a beautiful soul and a community titan. And we're going to miss her. So thoughts to her, for her community, and yeah, just a moment for her and what it is to be community.
Thank you. I feel the barbecue smoke coming back. Moving on to the CAO report. Initial Dutch Lake test results, among other things.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, as council is aware of, we did initiate a beach testing or beach water quality testing program this year, and that testing is done through Interior Health, who we take samples on a weekly basis. It goes to Interior Health and they do the actual testing. And what they're testing for is bacterial contamination, in particular E. coli. So this is done at a large number of publicly run beaches, not only within North Thompson, but also throughout the whole province. So we got our first numbers back, and it was from our first test. And the first numbers show that the water quality is, they call it acceptable. They don't say excellent, they call it acceptable or not acceptable. And our water quality was acceptable. The measure they use is they do a bacterial count. They take 100 milliliters of water, and from that they take a sample and put it in culture dishes and try to see how many bacteria will grow. So they found the count for Dutch Lake Beach was less than 2 bacteria. So I have a listing of a whole number of communities that do this with their beach just in this area. So all the way from Canoe up to Shuswap Lake Provincial Park, Sicamous, Sunny Brae, lots of the various areas here, and the lowest reading on this statistic is less than 2. So we are at the top quality, I would say, at that date, which is tested on June 24th. The process for this is the max allowable in any given testing is 235 bacterial count. whereas we were less than 2. The process that is done is you do samples on a weekly basis, you get the results back, and they average it over 5 samples. And the reason they do the average is it allows you to see if there's a trend where it's getting worse, but it also allows you to get an understanding of it's possible that you do get a bad sample. If a duck just happened to be swimming by right when you were doing the sample, you could get a bad sample, right? So our first sample was great. I think it's really good news to announce it in this meeting because we've got swimming lessons coming up, and obviously the beach is extremely well used. We will, in the future, the intent is not to bring these results back to council. These results are actually available to the public. So if the public is interested, they can go onto the Interior Health website under the public health area and look for water samples, and it shows all the comparables. The mayor actually suggested that we bring a comparable for some of the beaches down south in on the ocean in the Lower Mainland. The average numbers that they were producing this week was 60 to 70s of the bacterial count, with one of those up to 195 or 185. So it's a significantly higher level of contaminant down there, as you would expect with being on the ocean and not being such a clean environment, I suppose. So that is the result. If there is an issue, our management plan around it is if we get one bad sample, we will put out a notification that we had a bad sample, but it doesn't mean a beach closure or even a posting at the beach. If we get a bad sample and then the trending is staying bad, then we'll put out a notification on the beach that people need to shower and take that into consideration when they get out of the water. And even if the samples creep higher, then the intent would be that people change their usage of the lake potentially, and less swimming, more boating is fine because for most people they don't get too wet while they're boating. So you could change the use, but at this point in time, there's nothing concerning to report. I should note that there was a story recently about blue-green algae in a lake in Merritt that's receiving quite a bit of airplay. Apparently there was one dog that was swimming and died. We're not testing for blue-green algae, but blue-green algae is something that we've said when we get into the deeper level water testing, it's one of the areas what we will be testing for. At this point, there's no reason to suspect it's there. Blue-green algae, the tendency, if you see it, they said in the lake in Merritt, what was in question, the water was almost lime green, and there was massive amounts of algae and other contaminants on the surface. So we don't have that issue, but it is an area that as we move into further lake testing, as we talked about last meeting, we will be looking at that further. So, but the good news is at this point, it looks great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions on this? That's fantastic. That's fantastic to know, and also note that somebody used to run 5 water systems. Human error on test sampling can give you a bad test result as well. It's not necessarily that we've had a bad test. It could be somebody touched something immediately before sealing the bottle. Councillor Sim.
So just to clarify, we're going to have some ongoing testing, and did you say we're going to do 5?
Thank you, Councillor. The intent is to test every single week.
Okay.
So we
So
do
it's
that
ongoing.
testing. We won't bring those results back to council unless something's getting ugly. And then the numbers that they use, or the way they use the numbers to determine, how you're going to handle the contamination, is you take the average over 5.
Okay, that's what I understood. And then supplemental to that is, and the time when it would be brought to council is when it's over that 200. Is that what you're thinking? Or are you looking at like 100, or if there's an increase range? What are your thoughts when you would bring it to council's attention, given that it's new?
I think if we see a trend start to get negative and we're way out of line with other communities, we will bring that to council.
Great.
And the intent here is public protection, right? So if we see something go online, as soon as we as soon as we notice if it's a bad test, we'll get it retested as soon as we possibly can. And if it still stays bad, we'll get notification out to the public, because that is our goal, is public protection.
And I really want to thank everybody, and I think for council, is that, you know, there were some concerns, it was raised, and now it's being addressed, and it's public knowledge, and it's really reassuring to know that one of the things that we value most about our community is safe. And while they don't say it, it looks like we're exceeding. So.
Yeah, excellent news. Anything else, Mr. Johnson? Nope, nothing at this point. Okay. Moving on to new business staff reports. You do have the 2024 annual report in front of you. It is a large document, as it is every single year. It is what we do, what is going on, all sorts of mandatory reports, including financial statements, water reports. There is a ton of data in here. And once again, I thank staff for a fantastic looking report. Any questions, or are we presenting it all on this?
Well, I was going to read it word for word.
Okay, well, that'd be good. Can
But
we
I-
order pizza at 5 o'clock, please?
Turn
But,
off the lights on
any
my way out.
highlights you'd like to draw our attention to?
No highlights, other than we're here. If council has any questions, we're happy to answer any questions that come. And we are seeking a resolution
Yes.
of adoption of the annual report.
And Mr. Prime, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Blackwell. Just the one comment, if I could have, would be that hopefully this is the last time you see the water system report and the sewer water collection and treatment report in here. Those are only included as they're part of the council procedures bylaw, and that would be something that we're looking to amend in the fall.
And those do appear online anyways as a separate report, so those
That's
are available
correct.
to the
They are
public.
available on our document center.
Yeah. So through Civic Info. Net. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on this? If not, can I get a mover and a seconder to accept Councillor Sim?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just wanting to say that I thought it was probably one of the best annual reports. Like, there was a lot of really good information. I hope next year that we can fill in some blanks for some of the committees and get back to that function. And then also, I don't know if this is still being planned, given that the OCP is now on the books, but under the recreation programming, there was the suggestion to do a community survey to foster community engagement, understand demographic insights and community interests. Is that still a thought process, or do you think that will be captured under the OCP?
Thank you, Councillor. I think that we need to talk that one out a bit amongst staff. And the intent behind under recreation was not so much to do the broad community satisfaction survey that you might be referring to. Is more of a limited focus on, from a recreation perspective, is there anything else you would like to see? So kind of a limited engagement type survey. But my understanding is that after you go through an OCP process, there may be a bit of survey burnout and public engagement burnout for a while. And I think we got to be cautious of that. And perhaps there's a chance to piggyback on some of the events that we'll be holding if there's information we want more about recreation. And I'll talk to Ms. Culp about that. Whether we can piggyback with other stuff going on where people are coming in. We've talked about multi-purpose engagement for some of the OCP. So might be a chance to do that as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, I love a good survey for one, but the last one that we did in 2021, which we did to just do a pulse point on some of the COVID implications, and that gave some interesting surveys about who's living here, and there's been lots that's changed. And so it has been 4 years since we've had a demographic check-in, who is living here, what's happening, and how that might overlap with the OCP information. So you're probably right. Nobody wants survey burnout, but it's always interesting to find out who's here and what's needed, and is that caught in the OCP.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for those comments. Do I have a mover and a seconder back on this? Moved by Councillor Fizzle, seconded by somebody else. Put your hand in the air like you care. Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. All those in favor? And once again, thanks to staff for the hard work on that. It is a lot of compiling of information. Some of the data is very dry, but it is critical that we get this out. And now that it's approved, it can be put out there into the world.
One comment would be on what you're talking about some of these is the water conservation chart was maybe something that even if people didn't want to wade through the whole thing, is if they did look at the water conservation and the use, it certainly ties into that new grant that the district has received.
Water meters, yeah.
And the water meters and why. And just, it's so interesting to look at where some of those large uses are. And yes, January, who knew?
Yes, absolutely. And the tracking of information by staff on an annual basis is a lot what drives suggestions for a strategic plan and the things that we need to do on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Without good information, you're nowhere. So
Anyway, that's a good one should you need a highlight.
thank you. Do we have somebody online for 16.2 or this Clearwater River Bridge consulting team or project budget updates? True Engineering. Give us a second. Okay. We can see you peering with furrowed eyebrows at us, which means you're probably trying to get online here and ready to go.
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Can you hear
And
me?
we can hear you. It's a little bit low volume, but Mr. Prime can adjust, I'm sure, a little bit at his end. Or whatever. You can figure it out.
Good.
Is that better, Elsa?
That's good. We can hear
That's
you.
good. Okay. I think the letter, the budget summary that we had prepared has been distributed. We were there a few weeks ago and provided a bit of an update on the project. So I didn't feel the need to go into a further detail on that. I can provide one update just on the structural assessment, but I think the focus of today was more on trying to round out the entire project team and bring that forward to council with a breakdown of responsibilities and who the other team members were over and above Northwest Hydraulics, who we talked about there a few weeks ago. Just from a high level, the budget right now that we've updated and put forward, we've basically focused on the engineering, permitting, archaeology side. From a construction perspective, we don't see issues with the previous estimate that's been put forward, but we also haven't gone in and updated that because the design isn't yet complete enough to have a meaningful update to that. So those costs that actually just went into the grant, we basically just carried those through. I spoke in the letter a little bit about increasing the contingency and engineering amount. We've had some discussions with SIMF, quite a few actually. It's been a great process to work through with them, but their initial budget from their archaeologist on the file had indicated pretty high likelihood of finding archaeological, I don't know the right term, cultural value, I guess you would say. But we've assumed that right now the monitoring has been included, and if there is an archaeological find, we're going to have to quantify that at that time. And that would be better suited under a contingency item than trying to factor that into the overall consulting budget right now. So that's in general what we have on the archaeology side. And like I said, I'll reinforce it again. SIM's been great to work with on this. This is probably the most engagement that we've had on a capital project with SIMF in my time in Clearwater anyway. So that's been good. From an environmental perspective, we've got Lakeshore has helped us so far. They've done an initial assessment, and they will be putting forward it's called a construction environmental management plan. It's a supporting document that goes with the permit required to do works in and about a stream. So they will put that technical document together in consultation with whoever the general contractor is that we pick. And a lot of their time is on the environmental monitoring side. There is some front end reporting work, obviously, to secure the permits, but it'll depend on the contractor schedule and timing. So there's some assumptions factored in for budgeting on their end. We touched on the hydrotechnical stuff with Northwest Hydraulics. We had an update meeting with them this morning. They're working through the updated modeling and checking things like the climate change and different flow rates and whatnot. So that process is ongoing. Nothing really of meaning to report on the hydrotechnical side right now. From a structural perspective, ISL is completed what they can so far. Now they are waiting on the results from the geotechnical engineer. They've completed the borehole, and they're waiting on lab testing for the underlying soils at depth. So once we have that, we will fold it into the overall program and give Northwest Hydraulics what they need on that side. Initial results. This doesn't include the geotech information, so some assumptions on the geotech factored in there is that a load limit, like a load rating for that bridge, isn't needed. That accounts for the scour hole that we have there right now. So that was something that we touched on that, just kind of out of an abundance of caution that we would explore and more than likely put in place, but the structural engineer doesn't see the need for it, so we can hold off on that. And if something changes on that, obviously that'll be communicated through staff and likely through to council. In terms of TRU's role in this, part of this is the work that was done to date, all the pre-design work that kind of led us to where we are as of like a month ago. And that work included kind of engaging with some of the permitting bodies and SIMF, obviously, and putting the design team together. And the scope obviously changed once we identified this scour hole, and the project became more complex than originally anticipated. But that's the preliminary pre-design aspect of it. Moving forward, we thought it was best to try and split our involvement into two buckets, I'll say. One is going to be managing the project, the timelines, the schedule, approvals. That is going to happen all the way through, obviously. I think that'll likely be me for a lot of that. And then there will be a same team, but others will probably do a little bit more of the heavy lifting on the inspection side and preparing the contracted procurement elements. The rest of the team members, like Northwest Hydraulics, they focus on hydrotechnical modeling and engineering. They don't do procurement. They don't do contracts. Like, that's not their specialty. So that's fine. We do that all the time. So it makes sense for us to take that on, as well as be the main presence on site. From a day-to-day basis, Northwest Hydraulics will continue to have a obligation as the engineer of record on this, more see key milestones. But we foresee us taking on that kind of day-to-day inspection and contract administration role. That's a bit of a summary of what I tried to capture in the letter, but yeah, I just thought I would open it up to any questions or thoughts on the breakdown. I'm happy to answer them as best I can.
Thank you for that. Yes, good news on the load restriction, engineer clearing that. That was a huge concern. Are there any comments from staff at all before we move on? Mr. Johnson, or no?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it's a bit of a comment around just the logistics of managing the project from a staff side. As council is aware, spending authority for the CAO is set at $100,000 for any given expenditure. But we did make a change to the our purchasing policy to allow a higher level in unusual circumstances. And the only thing unusual right now is that our next scheduled council meeting is August 19th, and it stays few and far between on our council meetings for over the summer period, and the clock is ticking on this project. So I'm going to be asking council for a resolution that, in accordance with 7.1E of bylaw number 146, 2015, council authorize the chief administrative officer to exceed their standard delegated authority for expenditures related to the Clearwater River Bridge abutment project up to the budgeted amount as allocated in the 25 to 2029 financial plan. And of course, reporting will be coming back to council on a regular basis of how the project is going, where expenditures are. So, but this was specifically a project that I had in mind when we actually asked for that amendment to the purchasing bylaw. Sorry, that's a bit of a aside from the report of Chris's.
Questions, comments, council? I see Councillor Sim, you've got a furrowed brow. Would you like to contemplate that for a minute? So yeah, I mean, I realize that we have no council meeting till the end of August, and the opportunity needs to be taken when we have access to engineers, and also noting that the last report said we were at 87% of our snowpack was gone for this time of year, so we're at 13%. So we may have low water earlier than normal, which might allow for a wider construction season, other noting salmon, so which is a whole other thing. Councillor Sim, you got your question yet?
No, that's actually a really good perspective and why that this would be important to do. So it's just understanding.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually the other way around where projects drag on longer than we want them to, but this is one where we may have to actually move quicker.
Yeah,
take
no, I
advantage of
appreciate you
opportunity.
sharing that information.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so, so there, you did put forward a resolution, or recommendation. Does somebody want to move and second that, if they're okay with that?
I'll move that.
Okay, moved by Councillor McKenzie, that in this case, we allow the CAO to exceed the $100,000 limit. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Herring. Further discussion? And this is not the norm, this is going to a over policy, so just to state that out loud. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing no opposed, that passes. Thank you. Thank you for the report, Mr. Crowell. Excellent work on that so far.
Thanks, guys. Chat soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye. And now moving on to item 16.3. Summary of engagement for new park uses at Weyerhaeuser Park. There are multiple documents attached, including a report that I believe the CAO is going to tackle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not going to talk to all the attachments. I thought it was important to include them all so council can see all the information that's gone out there. As council is aware, one of our strategic focuses that we have, and I have it quoted later in the report, is engaging communication and public consultation. So the goal of this was that we were proactively engaging with the public. So to that end, I included a copy of all the engagement that we did, the report that we did, the survey that was done, and then the detailed survey results, so people can be sure that their comments that they made through the official channel of this survey actually came through and is in front of council. So before I get started, before I go through this, and I'm going to deliver some of the summarized results, but I do want to acknowledge that this engagement really was a team effort. There was a number of staff people worked on it, but I would like to specifically acknowledge work done by Jenna Campbell, who organized the survey, inputted a bunch of the results of people who completed surveys manually. She organized the public meeting. She's taken lots of calls. She just did an outstanding amount of work on this file, and I want to thank her for that. So the purpose of this report is to review the results of the recently concluded engagement process for both the dog park and the bike park. Both of those requests came from outside groups. The Rotary Club asked us to consider allowing a dog park somewhere, and that they are interested in funding or partially funding that endeavor. Shortly after we got that request in, we also had a request from a group of people interested in creating the bike parks. So we decided to handle, with council's blessing, to handle both of those engagements at the same time. I think it's important to understand that those are separate and distinct projects. One doesn't have to happen for the other to happen, but it made sense to do the engagement at the same time so that people could understand what we're really looking at for that park if those proposals are approved by council to proceed. And what we're seeking is just council's direction with regards to the next steps. There's no recommendation because this is clearly in council's bailiwick from a decision-making process. So with regards to the engagement process, as mentioned, both proposals for those new park items came to council meetings. A brief project description was developed. That's a 4-page description that's in the back and in the appendix to this report, and it includes the proposed site layout of the park. Some of the interesting things on that site layout is that the proposed dog park was put on the one side with the least amount of housing. So the least amount of housing, and also has some separation from the parking lot. And sorry, the layout of that is on page 174 of 213. So separation of the dog park from any of the things such as the Dragonfly Splash Park or the proposed bike parks for the dogs, so people can take their dogs on leash to and from the parking lot to the off leash dog park. So that's why it was laid out in that way. So project description was developed, including the visual layout of the park. That project description was hand delivered to the residents whose properties abut the park, just to make sure that they had the most complete information available. We also posted that up on our website. Project description included links to the survey and also a hard copy of the survey if people wanted to fill it in. So the survey results you see in front of you includes both of those. It's the people who filled it in electronically and the ones who did the hard copy. Public meeting was held on June 25th from 3:30 to 6 p.m. That was done right down at the park. And that was done at the park so that hopefully residents who had concerns could come down there and actually talk to us, tell us what their concerns were. As well, at the same time when we did that, did the layout in the park with stakes showing where the various features would be. So people really got a good sense of what we were talking about. Everyone who attended that meeting was encouraged to fill out the survey, and quite a number of them did. We had hard copies of it there. In addition, CFJC Today ran a story about it on June 5th, which also included links to the survey and a referral to our public meeting, which was useful. The survey was kept open till June 30th, and that allowed people a full month to submit their feedback. So the survey results, there's a chart which shows them, but some of the interesting stats about them is that for the dog park, 71.8% in favor. So that's of the 206 total survey results, 148 were in favor. That's a 2.6 to 1 ratio. So for every person who's not in favor, there was 2.6 people in favor. 40% of the respondents who reported that they would use the park daily or weekly. For the bike park, 87.9% were in favor. That's 181 of the 206 respondents, 7.2 to 1 ratio, and 43% of the respondents would use daily or weekly. The public meeting, there was 60 to 70 residents. That's a hard number to get the exact handle because people wandered in and out through that meeting. It was set up as an open house where we had the layout and we were there to answer questions. And as mentioned, a number of those folks did complete the survey or said they were going to go home and do the electronic survey. So there's no separate results from the public meeting. Those are included in the actual results from the survey. Good discussions with the immediate neighbors of the park. Their concerns obviously related to how the proposals will impact their own use of their own properties. And we discussed that a little bit further later on. So common themes, and flipping to the discussion section. The full survey results are attached, and you can hopefully get a chance to read those. But some of the common themes were on question 5, provide comments about the dog and bike park. Overall sentiment was supportive of both projects. And you can see that with the numbers what came through. Essentially 72% and 88%. So pretty good numbers. A significant number of residents view both the dog park and the bike park as positive additions that would benefit families, children, and tourists. Opposition and concerns. Others expressed strong reservations, mainly concerning the location, the potential for noise, and any potential taxpayer burden. Top themes identified, and these were themes where more people specifically wrote those in their actual comments to the survey. So these themes would be borne out if you go look at the actual survey themselves. Many respondents see these amenities as needed, help to support young families, kids, and dog owners. Some folks thought this would enhance tourism, community wellness, and provide low-cost recreation opportunities. The proximity to other amenities like the splash park and the grocery store were cited as a strength. And that's a strength not just for tourists coming in looking for something, but it's a strength for families. If you want to take your family and maybe there's different interests with the kids, or you got to do some shopping or whatever, it's a lot of people listed that they like that location because of that. Concerns about the dog park. Quite a number, over 40 responses raised concern that the dog park is too close to homes or the children's play area. Some were concerned about noise, concerned about the potential for barking of dogs and loss of quiet enjoyment of their own properties. Safety concerns. Some comments were flagged around the risks of child and dog interactions, especially off-leash dogs near the playgrounds. Maintenance and enforcement. Several cited issues like lack of cleanup, dog fights, bylaw enforcement gaps, and the fear of liability. And let me just note, I'm going to have a little summary later on, but is kind of a staff response to some of these issues. Alternative sites suggested, locations suggested for a dog park that we should consider instead of this were the Echo Depot, Swanson Road, Dutch Lake right here at the community center down in the park, and across from Bilo Foods were suggested as more appropriate. Concerns about the bike park were youth behavior. Fear about noise, loitering, graffiti, and after-hours activities were expressed. A lot of people had fears about tree preservation. There seemed to be a bit of I would say it's a misconception that we were going to go into these areas and clear cut them and create wide open spaces. That isn't the intent. The intent will be to preserve trees and keep natural buffers. And some folks also noted that trails and a skate bike park already exist and questioned the need for another facilities. Some concerns raised about cost to taxpayers, insurance and liability, prioritization over essential infrastructure, and ongoing maintenance funding. Suggestions from the public were to add separate zones for small and large dogs, ensure double gated entry, bear-proof containers and RV parking, install benches, shade, and bike park progression features, consider pilot fencing before permanent development, and prioritize community engagement, transparent costs, and grant funding. So comments on those issues, I'm just going to go through it and then I'll stop to see if council has comments they want to make. But from staff comments on question 5, and that's based on discussions with neighbors at the public meetings, and some suggestions for mitigation to disturbances to their property could be as follows. First, the initial plan that we put out showed a perimeter pathway around the whole park, which is essentially right next to the neighboring properties and then tagged into the tag or to the pathway on the Myrtle Crescent. So eliminating or relocating that perimeter pathway, which is adjacent to the private properties, would be a suggestion from the local residents. The concern was they wanted more separation of their properties from park users, felt if that perimeter pathway was put in, people who had maybe ill intent would have easier access to the back of their properties. Another suggestion was if any incremental lighting was suggested, we keep it to the road side of the park. Residents felt that this would help to discourage nighttime activities, particularly with, again, concern with people going up to their properties. I have to say that that's a bit opposite from normal SEPTED considerations, and SEPTED is crime prevention through environmental design, which typically they recommend better lighted areas help to prevent crime. I think in this case, maybe it's a bit of a dual concern. It's around, people potentially going to the back of their properties at night, but also the potential for light pollution from the park spilling into their properties, which is a valid concern. When designing the new use areas, leave a buffer of trees against the properties where possible. So a bit of a undeveloped buffer would be the property owner's preference. Try to encourage day use primarily in the park areas. And it already is in the Splash Park. Day use is encouraged, not nighttime use. And I think the feeling was the same with the other parks if those uses are allowed by council. Regarding the concern of dogs mixing with people, and when I say people are worried about their kids primarily. The dog park is located, the plans for it are at the end of the park with the least amount of housing. Parking lot separates the Splash Park and the bike park from that dog park. So that's a bit more incremental separation. Dogs are expected to be on leash until they're in the dog park. So, and having walked that park quite a number of times, that could actually result in fewer off-leash dogs in the rest of the park area. If there's signage saying keep your dogs on leash until they go into the dog park. So, because currently when you walk there, you do see a number of people walking their dogs or dogs walking themselves off leash. And to further mitigate that concern, it might be useful to complete the fencing for Dragonfly Splash Park. There's one section of it not fenced, and that adds even another fence separation between those kids and potentially off-leash dogs. So I think those go a ways towards mitigating the concern around mixed uses. As mentioned earlier, tree removal will be kept to a minimum. Both the dog park and the bike park will be designed with the goal of leaving trees. Having said that, fire smart procedures will be conducted on the whole park. They've actually already started and done quite a bit of an update, completed it this year already, but we would be looking at it through a bit of a different lens, which is more of a park use lens. So probably more of the brush would end up getting cleared out, because that also improves sight lines for parents watching their kids or their dogs. With regards to potential liability, that's reduced by appropriate signage. Warning of obviously use at their own risk, but also advising users of the park of what the safety rules are. So safety rules relative to dogs, safety rules relative to use in the bike park. It's also suggested that before any building or the final design is finished, that the plans are reviewed by a professional to ensure that Any safety concerns are kind of addressed, and best practices have been considered. Regarding the cost to taxpayers, which did come up a number of times, that'll be explored in the next phase. If council desires to proceed with this project, then we will, from a staff perspective, be doing the diligence around what's this going to cost, how much funding is available, how much funding are the proponent groups going to be able to raise towards these projects, and how much work they can be done, right? So we don't know what that number is yet, so I can't report that to council. So that's the first question, council. That was a question of comments and concerns about the dog and bike park. Happy to stop there if you want to ask questions, or I can keep rolling through the report.
Council, have any questions to this point? I did note one of the comments in there, and you brought it up sort of briefly, just relation to Myrtle Crescent continuation on the design plan. So I know the current dog park outline in the one plan actually overlays onto the roadbed of what Myrtle Crescent would be. But I also, correct me if I'm wrong here, the road moving through there on Myrtle Crescent to connect to Myrtle Crescent, is that what it is, will not be developed until Bilo decides to develop that second large piece of property, which is the property across the street that they own. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, Mr. Mayor, is that property, as it develops, some of that will be subject to getting Myrtle Crescent finished off, and it probably will be required at that point in time if there's much development there. And the interesting thing about it with Myrtle Crescent is, if it's only fencing what gets attached there, fencing is pretty easy to move, and we haven't done the final actual layout on these projects yet. It's possible that the fencing may be on the park side of Myrtle Crescent to prevent that in the future, and also to allow a bit of overflow parking there, because we're not exactly we're hoping the parking is adequate, but it may be a little tight there depending on the usage, right? So subject to that final layout, we need to make a decision there. We'll see based on that layout what the preferred sizing is for that park. It could probably be moved in.
Thank you. Any further questions at this point, or just let Mr. Johnson continue? Not seeing anything. Keep going.
Okay. So question number 6, what would you like to see at the park? So the top suggestions for park enhancements were games and barbecue areas. Several residents suggested adding a public barbecue area, increasing the picnic space or game courts such as volleyball or badminton as alternatives or additions to the park and bike park proposals. Seating and comfort. Requests are made for benches, shaded rest spots, and gathering areas to encourage social interaction and comfort for visitors. Water access for the dogs. And this is something I think is really important into the design, and it's actually one of the benefits of the site is there's already water at the site. And I think within the dog park itself, one of the required little amenities would be a doggy fountain where they can go and drink. Waste management. Multiple people said we need bear-proof garbage containers, ample dog waste bags, and regular maintenance. I think that kind of goes without saying. Parking and RV access. Trail access and natural features. Some residents encourage the preservation of trees, maintaining those trails in that park, and ensuring that the park green space isn't overly cleared or fenced off. So we can see that's a real trend through this whole thing. People want trees. Fencing and safety design. Double gated entry for the dog park, which is excuse me, kind of the standard that's used. And a separate fenced area for large or small dogs. Suggestions were made for good lighting or use at your own risk signs to mitigate safety concerns. Playground and youth features. In addition to the bike park, some suggested or some asked for expanded youth activities, bathroom upgrades, or even a new skate park. Multi-use and family-friendly designs. Others envisioned a multi-use rec space for families rather than separating dog, bike, and child-specific areas. So those are the more common themes that came up on the survey. So a bit of response to that, and So first, the playground is located at Splash Park, definitely is in need of upgrading. So that comment came up, and clearly it does. The playground there is timing out as far as being an effective playground anymore. It's old and it's not really the most exciting playground to be at. This is going to be required regardless of the outcome of these proposals. That's a regular capital item, and it will be addressed over the next while in our normal budget process. If these proposals do proceed, staff also would suggest that the existing picnic area and areas where the public gathers does need to be expanded. There's space for it there, and it does need to be expanded because I think we'll see a lot more people down in the park. Existing uses and trails should be maintained despite the new developments in the park. I think that's a really great goal. The goal isn't to try to shut people out of the park who are used to going there for walking or whatever. It should be to enhance the uses of the park, not to reduce the uses for some folks. Some of those trails may need to be relocated depending on where the infrastructure gets placed. If these proposals proceed, there will need to be some consideration of signage. Obviously, new dog park, new bike park, safety signage as we discussed, but I think road signage on Highway 5 as well. I think this is the park. One of the benefits of it is it's so well adjacent to Highway 5. Garbage removal, including bear-proof receptacles, will need to be enhanced for these park uses. The parking lot will need to be organized. Doesn't mean it's going to be, we're not planning, if this goes ahead, to pave it right away or to expand it significantly until we really kind of see what the needs are. But it does need to be more organized, with the feeling that this may be an area where it needs some future attention as well if the room isn't enough for parking. The parking lot will no longer be available for use as a snow or a sand dump if the park is developed further. So we're going to have to find an alternate location for those. As this park develops, there's going to be lots of ideas for inclusion in the park. Those ideas, could be subject for future grants, for donations, or potentially council could say, hey, let's try this under a council initiative. So one of the final sections I'd like to talk about is the highest and best use of Weyerhaeuser Park. And whenever you talk about planning, that question always comes up. What's the highest and best use? Because that's really what's in front of council. The interesting question is, neither one of the uses proposed are really high infrastructure uses. They're pretty light touch on the environment. So if something had to change in the future, it's possible that it still could. Neither one of these are forever infrastructure that we're building. We're not building a big concrete parkade there, for example, which is hard to move. But the question should still be asked regarding highest and best use of the land being considered. Differences arise on your thoughts on that depending on how you're impacted by this park. Some of the suggested alternate land uses that I've heard in these discussions, number one, just leave it as relatively unused green space. Number two, development land for housing. Or this proposal in front of us, which I call more kind of getting more into the central park concept. So leaving it as green space, some residents mentioned that they moved to their homes specifically because they backed onto green space. They see that almost as a expansion of their own backyards. It's a great feature to enjoy, but it's not reasonable to think that the most premium space owned by the district will stay undeveloped because it may impinge on some private property enjoyment. Our objective, though, having said that, the objective behind this development is still maintain a green forested space that's a great place to live beside. And for anyone who's used to living beside central parks or golf courses or wherever there's green space, even when there's lots of public use, they're desirable spaces just because that expansion to the green space. Another suggestion was land for housing development. And this parcel would be fabulous for housing development. It's close to services, close to amenities. It's well serviced by roads already. And the large parcel size could allow for really interesting mixed-use development. However, one other point is if municipalities do have land that can be contributed to housing projects, they can sometimes attract really great projects. There's no question that all that's true. However, the area where we're thinking is the highest priority, this high priority area of the downtown, we're already planning a significant amount of development there. There's development being proposed on Park Drive and a significant amount of it. And as well, there's infill opportunities throughout Clearwater to meet those future housing demands. So really great spot for housing. Is it really critical that we turn that into housing? If that was the only space left in the downtown, maybe it would be a bit higher priority in my own opinion. Weyerhaeuser Pioneer Park it's kind of unique for our district. Central to our busiest business district, close to our most dense housing, and is close to what should be most of our future or much of our future housing development. Personally, I think it would be short-sighted to consider that green space to be anything other than a park to be enjoyed by all. Central Park concept really provides some synergies. Includes providing utilities such as the washrooms, the garbage services, the water, and other maintenance needs to all be centralized. Not only centralized, but already in place for much of it. The roads are in place, at least a reasonable parking lot's in place, the water's in place, much of the fencing is in place. So all of those things are already there, or in parking is in one location versus multiple lots. Easy access to the mall, and mall parking is also a benefit, particularly I think for if someone's pulling in with an RV, there is some bigger lots there. The benefit of more centralized location may be useful for attracting more drive-through traffic to stop in Clearwater. But even more important is, as we talked about a little bit earlier, is it's great for families who want to go to a park. Let's go to the park and throw the bikes and the kids and the dog and everyone head to the park. A signature Central Park can help build identity and sense of place. This is an interesting statement, and it might be a bit controversial. I don't know that the neighbors want to have a signature Central Park right beside them, but it does help to build a sense of place. My personal belief is that that area of Clearwater is becoming our de facto town center. And this adds to that. Examples include MacArthur Park. A really great example is that people are sometimes not familiar with the Centennial Park in Hunter Mile House, where it's off the beaten road so you don't see it, but really a great park. Adds a lot to the community. And Laborde Park in Quesnel, which I'm very familiar with, was our favorite feature in the whole town, and it was the same thing, a piece of land that was lots of different uses on it. And then, as mentioned earlier, from a land use perspective, pending further development on the lands on the other side of Myrtle, it may be necessary to complete Myrtle Crescent at some point. Should be kept in mind, we shouldn't put any infrastructure on there that's hard to move. Fencing itself is not that hard to move, but we'll also look at the overall footprint needed. So from a next steps perspective, the next steps are different for the two proposals. If council approves a dog park proposal or moving ahead with, they like what they see and want to move ahead with it, then cost estimates will be done, including fencing, installing, cost estimates also for a water fountain, design of trails and open spaces, costing of any additional play features, and fire smarting the whole site. The district will work with the Rotary Club to determine what funding they can provide and to advertise to see if there's local donors who would like to contribute funding or work or machinery to the cause. Likely that the design and costing could be completed by this fall, although construction could be delayed until next year. The bike park is a bit of a different proposal. The group who put that proposal forward said that they can do most of the work. said that they have contractors who are willing to chip in and help out. And it's a bit of an easier proposal in the sense that it doesn't require fencing. You don't need as much features. It's more of a, okay, let's design it, let's make some trails. And it should be noted that at this point in time, the bike park is proposed to be, it's a dirt park. It's not paved, so it's not a huge infrastructure cost. If the bike park proposal is approved, this project could happen much faster given the large group of enthusiasts who would contribute to the project. I think the next step would be to book a meeting with that group as soon as possible after council gives a go-ahead and really develop an implementation plan. And then report what that plan is back to council along with any annual upkeep estimates. So that's kind of the results of the engagement and staff thoughts on it. From a strategic priority perspective, this ticks a few boxes for council. Enhancing community vibe, supporting the social, cultural, and recreation programs. I think this is a good project for that. It's a strong project from a partnership perspective. And that actually builds on the partnership concept that occurred with the Dragonfly Water Park, where that was very much a partnership. And in this case, the Rotary Club and the cycling community were all enthusiastic about getting to work on it. So it's kind of neat that whole park is kind of envisioned as it's very strong volunteer component to every bit of that park. And then the third of the strategic priorities is engaging communication and public consultation. We feel that the engagement has been proactive, and it has been real engagement in the sense that we sought opinions and thoughts and brought those back to council before a decision was made. All we did, we heard the request from the groups, we collected the input, and now we're bringing it back to council. At this point, the only financial investment in this project is staff time. The next step, if council chooses to proceed with one or both of the proposals, is to develop cost estimates, consider the level of community contributions to the project, consider grant funding opportunities. And grant funding opportunities is an interesting one because potentially this could be an interesting project for grant funders. The age-old question with grant funding is if you wait till you've got grants for everything, you may wait years and years and years. It can be the most convenient way to delay projects is look for grants. And of course, we'll develop an estimate of the annual operating costs. The communication to the public will depend on where council's decision points are coming out of this meeting. And council has options. Proceed to the design and costing phase for the dog park, the bike park, or both features. Defer a decision on these until the completion of the OCP or any other option at the discretion of council. And then that's just a list of attachments which follow along, and it's quite a long pile of attachments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Get a drink of water. My mic was on. Questions of staff or comments? Councillor Herring, go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to say, thanks for the detailed report. To me, this looks like there's widespread community support. It's great to see both these applications being spearheaded from community groups. I think there's a lot of good suggestions we got from the public consultation. Ooh, I'm personally in favor of moving on to the cost estimates phase. I think, definitely lots to incorporate here from the feedback, but overall, really great idea, I think.
Okay, further comments, questions? Councillor Sim.
I think it was great, and we certainly got a diverse number of thoughts. I really appreciated hearing, things like, wouldn't mind some more green space for some items. It was difficult to understand the exact sizing of both proposals. So if I get this right, is that the suggestion from Rotary is that the park would be a proposed area of 5,096 square meters, which is approximately 1.2 acres. Is that right?
I would just add that the sizing is challenging here. And it's not just the dog park. We need to consider what features, where the fencing will lie, how much of a buffer we want from the properties. The intent behind the layout was more to show people, here's the area. We still, if council proceeds, we're still going to do some of that detailed design. And interestingly enough, I think the bike parks, both bike parks, the pump track and the bike trails, while there's a blocked layout there, it shows a nice polygon on the map. If it's not fenced and if there's trails in there and there's green space in between, the impact is way less than what you would actually see on the map. If you saw this on the map, you think, oh, we're losing half our park to the bike. That's not the way it will be. The actual footprint of the features itself will be smaller, right? So it's, in answer to your question, Councillor, you're right. The actual layout of the exact sizing, that work hasn't been done yet, and we'll certainly, once we get further into the design, be able to put that out. Again, our intent was just to show the public, here's the general areas that we're talking about.
Thank you very much for that, because when council has discussed dog park, which has been a long-standing one, and in 2021 we had actually had at the council table 4 location suggestions, which were the Splash Park, Ball Park, Clearwater Village Road, and Lot 3 on Park Drive. And so on each of those, the approximate cost, and that was 4 years ago, was on average $70,000 each. So I think it is important to look at what Councillor Herring is asking for, is what are the costs? So although maybe it's a great idea, is it something that can be costed? I am wondering, when you go forward, if we go forward with some of these costings, if some of the questions to be considered would be, what are the ongoing impacts to the taxpayer? So for example, maintenance, and how would that work for any disposal or waste collection or anything? So I think that would be important. Also in size. So, one of the comments referred to the appreciation of the size that was in Barrier, which is a very, very small area. And it looked like it was a rubberized area. So would different variations be considered based on costs?
So when we do the costing, we will bring that back
Okay.
to council. And I think those are appropriate questions around the sizing and everything else when that comes back.
My other question would be, is in pursuing any sort of a next stage report, would there be consideration to go out to maybe 3 to 5 other communities to get their experience? And again, going back to the report, I use Barrier as the example. Some people have said the dog park in Barrier is never used and maybe this wasn't such a great idea. Other people have said best thing, they look for it when they travel. So what would be unintended consequences from other communities that we might want to look at in a possible report?
Yep.
Okay, noted. Further questions or comments? Not seeing them at the table here.
Oh, sorry.
One more. Go ahead.
Yeah, and again, I'm sure that this would all be if we move forward with what Councillor Herring is doing. But also, they do have to, if both projects are considered, they have to be considered together in terms of space and a plan. Is that sort of the intention, or to do 2 separate?
These are separate and distinct projects. And council could choose one project and not the other project. But the reason we brought them together, because it makes sense if you're talking about impacts to people who live there. It doesn't make sense to say, hey, we're going to do this, and then go back 6 months later and say, hey, we're going to do this. People need to understand what the cumulative impacts are of planning decisions. So that's why we brought this all together as one, so they can get a sense for, here's the overall vision of the park at this point in time. Like I say, there may be other uses in the future, but at this point in time, here's the uses we're thinking about. And do they need to be done together? No, I don't think so. Like I said earlier in my report, I actually think the biking enthusiast group could hit this thing running once they get the go-ahead from council, and probably get a project done pretty quickly. Whereas I think the bike park, just due to the fact it's got to be fenced, we got to think about a few more features in there, it's going to be a bit of a slower burn to get it done. Oh, sorry. The dog park is going to be a slower burn. I think the bike park could be really quick, depending on
Yeah,
what
and I
that
guess
group
what I'm
wants to
asking
do.
for is because how big is the size of space that we're looking at?
The total space in this park is 5 acres.
And that's what I'm asking for. So if maybe, let's say the bike park has got great traction, it could be done tomorrow, and they say, this is our plan for 3 acres, but we haven't considered the input of how we use it. So that's why I'm asking if the planning or potential outline of the two projects would be considered together.
Absolutely. Yeah, they would be considered together. And I just want to say, from the whole concept of potentially other uses in the future, if the space isn't needed for what they're doing, our preference would be to leave it as green space so that you're still achieving what the residents want, which is green space, and you're still then leaving yourself space in the future if other great concepts come forward, right? I think this 5 acres seems like a lot of space, but by the time you start putting uses here and there, it's used up quite quickly. So we do want to preserve that open area as much as possible. So.
Okay, and then the last one is should we again go forward, is what would be the seasonality? So that was one question that was raised in there. Is this a year round? Would it be closed on certain times? Like, just looking at form and function, given the fact that we're a 4-season community and understanding the impacts for that. That also relates to snow clearing. Like, there's a lot of those considerations that would also have to be addressed in any costs.
And my understanding at this point in time is that the bike park would probably, when it's in heavy snowfall time, would probably see pretty low usage. And I also understand for pump tracks, typically, like when it's springtime and the ground's wet, you want to keep people off it just to allow the ground time to firm up and you don't have to rebuild it all over again. With regards to the bike park, based on what I've seen over the winter here in Clearwater, people walk their dogs
So
year
dog
round.
park you're talking about.
Sorry, again, I apologize. The dog park, people like to walk their dogs year round. So if there's a lot of snow, are they going to go in there? I'm not sure about that. Would they be prevented from going in there? Probably not.
Right. Anyway, I would be supportive of Councillor Herring's thought. We need to go forward to look at the cost assessment to make other decisions. This seemed like a really great way to gauge the community input, and I hope that the report and any costs would respond to some of the concerns that were heard and expressed.
Councillor Frizzle.
Which leads me to the green space and the property lines. Could we just make sure that they can maintain as much of that green that they bought their property for?
Maintain the buffer.
Yeah, right at the buffer, just along the line, so that when they've got that tree line
Yeah.
and then the park, and then they have that bit of a buffer there.
Yeah.
Noting that it's going to be fire smarted anyways, but
Yes.
I mean, the intention has never been to remove any more trees than necessary. Fir beetle's going to do that naturally through that neighborhood and is already doing that. See it both between Helmick and Robson, and then also at the medical clinic between Drought and Fir beetle. It's getting into there. Couple of comments. Yeah, thank you for the very detailed report and for staff doing the consultation meetings. Thanks to council for attending those that did. I think they're both great projects. I also would like to see them go forward as far as planning and costing, noting full well that even if this is not the location that they end in, that information would be incredibly valuable. So I would like to see them both go forward as well. Everywhere I go, including I was just in Ottawa and Montreal, I look at what other communities do. Cumberland is a highly successful community that has pump track and all its mountain biking facilities leading right out of downtown. You literally leave your hotel at the end of the street. All of this starts for you. There is also an adjacent dog park there. Vernon and Kamloops both have dog parks that are right in neighborhoods. The one in Vernon is called Mission Hill. It joins at least 50 properties with no fencing in between or no buffer zone. So these things do exist out there in the wild. we are not reinventing a wheel here. This is things that other communities have done, and these things have been in place for decades, if not half a century, in some of these places, in one form or another. So I like to consider it in those senses that we are doing something that is not unique to Clearwater, but is new to Clearwater in a sense. So, but yes, I would like to see both of these go forward, at least a planning stage, so or costing stage. Councillor Sim.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is that there's no final decision being made here because you need to get the cost things. But I think what is exciting is one is that both projects were brought forward by community groups. With the express interest of doing that. So my gratitude to both groups who took the time to invest in their community and a future vision. And then the second thing is what can we do with that? And what do the numbers say? Like what's feasible, what's not feasible? And maybe other ideas are generated, but we do need those costs as the mayor has suggested in order to look at next one. So is staff looking for two different motions?
So thinking about motions, I think the one motion I would like for council to consider would be that council approves the public engagement process as being sufficient, and then direct staff to bring back further costing and detailed design on this. Understanding at that point in time, it's going to take some cost to do that. I'm not sure if council is comfortable giving us an approval in principle on these projects until they see what those costs are. But at least the approval of the engagement and moving it on to the next step.
Okay, Councillor Herring.
Yeah, I'll make that motion to
So you want to make the motion to approve the
approve
engagement?
the engagement and to proceed with getting us cost estimates for the next step.
Okay.
Would you mind if we did two for each project?
Like do one for the dog park, one for the bike park. I mean, we can separate if there's different opinions around the table about both.
I'm fine with that, noting full well that it'll probably make things easier in the long run. You know, I don't want one to get dragged down by the other or vice versa if there's changes to that. So let's do the bike park, the one with the most obvious public support on this one first.
Yeah, I'll move that motion with friendly amendment then. So for the bike park.
Okay, so why don't we, if maybe I suggest this to you, is motion to direct staff to work with the bike park volunteer group to formalize and cost a concept plan for pump track and children's bike trail.
Does that work with what you need, Mr. Johnson? Okay.
I think so, and if I just may, Director of Finance suggested that we take any fees for if we get professional engagement out of council initiative projects.
Yep, sounds good to me. Yep. Okay, so we have a funding source as well. Good. Okay, so moved on that one. Seconded.
I'll second it.
Okay, further discussion. This is the bike park. All those in favor? Okay. Now same question on the dog park.
Yeah, so to put forward a motion to work with Rotary, or to direct staff to work with Rotary to develop cost estimates for a dog park with consideration of community feedback and potential tax implications.
And I'll look to Mr. Johnson again to see if that hits all the marks. Okay, it does. Any further discussion around the table? I think this is where we start. This is still going to be, at least on one of these, probably a multi-year process. So,
And it allows still options based on
we need to know what we're getting into.
Yep.
So there we go. Okay, all those in favor? And that passes. Thank you.
And then I think you need the engagement one.
Sorry,
Moved by Councillor Sim, seconded by Councillor Frizzle.
thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
And do you need to approve the engagement plan? That was the third
Yeah,
one.
so move that engagement is completed and approved, moved by Councillor Herring, seconded by Councillor McKenzie. All those in favor, and that passes. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for all the work on that.
Yes, thank you.
Moving on to item 16.4, capital paving project, Dawson Paving. Just shows you what it costs to get a small section of road rebuilt and paved, and we're not even replacing the pipes in the ground. So there is a staff report. Mr. Carmichael, are you answering questions or speaking to this? Or?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Council. I should have included a drawing. So it is Myrtle Crescent from the Bilo intersection to Park Drive, but it also includes the Park Drive intersection and then up to the medical center access on Park Drive. So basically that whole area that's bad potholes in the winter.
Okay.
There we go. So that's the area. So it is just a fairly simple, just remove the asphalt, regrade the gravel and repave. The big discussion that I put in the report was more about the water main, that I'm planning to leave. It is about 50 years old, and we do have ideal conditions in Clearwater for AC pipe, like well-drained gravels and neutral pH in our water. So inside the pipe and outside the pipe, it's pretty favorable here. We do have many water breaks that we respond to, probably 15 or 20 a year. All of them have been service leaks since I've been here. So no main breaks in just about 3 years.
Yeah.
So that.
I do have one question, if you don't mind. So looking at this intersection, noting that the vast majority of the intersection there, the library is not going anywhere anytime soon. They just put money into renovations. I don't foresee the fourplex or the building, the apartment building, going anywhere soon. But we do have the one empty lot there. It does have an entrance at least. Does the design plan for that lot require any further in and out access to it, or will that all be accomplished through the existing mall plan? Is that?
Yeah, I believe there is access to that lot through the mall.
Okay, so yeah, just the whole "are we going to rip things up twice" thing.
Right.
But I'm asking the question out loud so it can be answered out loud. I think I already know the answer.
Right. As well as the utilities, there is a stub out for the sanitary shown on the mall's plan as well.
So the access for sanitary sewer and water would happen through the existing mall layout as well. So there's not going to be a need to separately service if a restaurant or something went into that empty lot.
Correct. Yeah.
There. Okay. And that is part of the Pattison owned properties there. So
Yes.
okay, thank you. The old courthouse site. Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Did you have further?
No. So on the same note, there, Public Works is going to dig up the old water service that's been terminated, that's on Myrtle Crescent, and just terminate it right at the main, so there's no chance for it to leak there. And I believe there is a service for the medical center. We may have to place that service as well, but we haven't went out and looked for it yet. So
okay. And then,
so if it does need to be replaced, Public Works would do that.
I know that there's been timelines mentioned on this, but we're expecting to do this in the fall.
Or I think.
Yeah.
And that there's going to require some closures of some of this area as well. So,
Right.
Yeah, so we're going to try to work to do that the best we can.
Yeah. So once we have the contract awarded, we can sit down with the contractor and come up with some ideas. But I think as far as timing, it would be 1 day of paving. Like, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so paving itself, but fixing some of the sub materials and things like that can be done in phases as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. There is a recommendation, but questions, Councillor Herring?
It's more of a comment, and it's just related to this. I know it's not directly connected to this project, but I do think we need to reevaluate intersection control at those two intersections as a separate process. The three-way stop that has 4 directions is the only one I've ever seen, and it causes some confusion. And then the actual intersection where the clinic and the high school are could really benefit from a 4-way stop instead of you know, the amount of people I see pulling out into traffic there. So I really think that a separate process, we need to look at the intersection control with both these intersections.
Good comments. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Sim.
To further on that, and I hope I'm not directionally challenged, but would that also maybe lead us to look at how, when you come off the highway into Bilo, that corner is quite unsafe for that pedestrian perspective. So it lends also to that full overview of safety.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure that some of that will get considered. So there is a recommendation related to this, that the council award the paving project to Dawson Paving in the amount of $180,958.53 plus GST. What is the desire of council? I'll move it from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Frizzle. Further discussion? Yes, of all the things we do, I think sewer is the least sexy. Roads is after that, and then water is the one that everybody absolutely needs. But these are the core functions that we do as a council, and it's important to get these things done. And if once we get this done and we don't hear a pothole complaint about this for at least 5 years, I will be a very happy person. So, any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. There is correspondence information only. For the Honorable Josie Osborne, Minister of Health, the Farmers Market Nutrition Coupon Program was refunded, which is great. No notices of motions. Comments from the public. If you would like to comment, come up to the mic and introduce yourself and say your piece.
I'm Julie Bonmore. Came down just for the meeting. I'm a resident right beside where the proposed dog park would be. I very briefly had a chance this morning to go over the same survey result. I think it should be noted 54.85% of the people that were in favor also said they would never or rarely would use it. From the quick review I did this morning, I didn't have a lot of time. I feel like the summary we heard was a little bit biased. I saw a lot of comments about it's a great idea, but the location isn't good. I also think it's gonna be quite crowded if we're looking at adding parking and eventually roads going through there. It truly doesn't feel super ideal for our community. I did take it upon myself to make a post. There's been a lot of comments. One thing that really struck me is if we're looking at it from a tourist aspect, I think directing traffic towards the info center would be huge for all the vendors that are in there already. Like I personally advertise there, as do most of all of what Clearwater offers. There's also a lot of RV parking there already. And the comment about it's the most dense resident area, to me seems like a good reason given the amount of space we have to possibly look at elsewhere. And I think that's about all I had to make. Oh, last question. I'm super curious. My experience here in almost 10 years is there's not a lot of presence for bylaw, like animal bylaw control.
Yeah.
Super curious how many people we actually have in the district with registered dogs. It seems like we put a lot of resources to this conversation and we're not, if we're a town that like is on top of dog ownership, that would be something. My experience is there's a lot of lack of animal bylaw. I hear people all the time complaining about dogs and no one's following up. So it seems like a big undertaking when we don't really have a base for animal control.
And what you're talking about is, first, we don't license dogs in the District of Clearwater, so
I was under the impression there is.
No, there is no.
Okay,
no
so there's none
license.
at all.
No dog, no cat licensing. We do respond to animal bylaw complaints. That was one of the reasons that council asked for a specific bylaw officer part-time. So we do have that, but even then, certain aspects of animal bylaw are handled by professionals beyond that. I can leave it to staff for further comments if they wish, but yeah, I hear you. Some of my worst dog interactions have actually happened in Weyerhaeuser neighborhood by a long shot. Human dog, me and my dog interactions, but just me by myself or my spouse by myself have happened in that neighborhood yet.
Last thing, the whole we can just pull a fence up. The reading I've done, dog parks done well have something other than just grass, because the dogs are just going to run that into like dirt. And so I'm assuming we'd have to lay something down other than just fence it.
Yeah, there's a lot of variations
Okay,
out there.
okay.
Yeah, that's why we want to go to
Yeah, and I think
explore it more. Yeah.
the argument that water is there seems like there's a lot of other locations where we have water at the road, I imagine.
Yeah, for sure. Councillor Sim, do you have a question?
No, I just want to say I really appreciate you raising that, especially about the tourists. And I thought the comments that were included were really good about maybe this is a good opportunity to engage with the info center and parks about how they could also, offer it, because they do. They have water there, they have space there, and also I think their fence needs to be replaced.
The other problem, this not to get technical, but the info center is a Class A BC provincial park.
It is.
It's the only one in the province, so it's actually governed under the BC Parks legislation. So it's not just land, which is very odd. And I only know this because I ran North Thompson. It's technically legally part of North Thompson. But to your point, is it the only location in the world for the dog park to go? This is not the only.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I was given the
Yeah.
impression at the
Yeah,
meeting. That's
sure.
what fired me up a little bit.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comments. Further comments or questions from the public? Not seeing anything, nothing online. We do have the need to move it to in camera. The meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91 of the community charter to discuss matters relating to discussions with the municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purpose of preparing an annual report under section 98. Can I get a mover and a seconder to move to in camera? So that is Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Frizzle. All those in favor? It is 3:51. We'll see you back here at 4 o'clock. Thank you.